Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Mormon Stories podcast. I'm your host, John DeLynn. It's December 18th, 2024, and I'm here with Margie. Hey, Margie.
Hi.
And we are here to give you another one of those classic bread and butter, everyday Mormon stories. And joining us today in studio are Clare Howell Adams, and Jackson Adams. And it's just a sort of a 20-something, late 20-something Mormon couple who recently has gone through a faith transition. And there's so many important stories that are common in the Mormon Stories experience, things like perfectionism, anxiety, scrupulosity, purity culture, sexual shame, mission experiences, early marriage, childbearing, faith journeys, all the stuff. What am I missing in core themes? Anything?
That's everything.
Is that pretty good?
Yeah, you got it.
Anyway, but y'all always ask for kind of everyday Mormon stories, and that's what you're in for today. So Clare and Jackson, welcome to Mormon Stories.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you, John.
So normally we start with an intention. We like to give people a chance to kind of tell, especially their believing loved ones, why they would want to be on Mormon Stories. So Clare, why don't we give you a chance to go first?
Yes, sure. I think for me, I have no ill intention whatsoever. This is me being authentic and true to myself. And Mormon Stories was such a lifeline for me going through my deconstruction. My hope is that if just one person can hear something that I have to say and resonate with that and not feel alone and feel seen, that's really important to me. I think you can feel crazy when you're in the middle of a deconstruction, feeling like no one else like you is experiencing it. So I just hope that I can help somebody like me feel not alone. Love it.
Beautiful. All right. How about you, Jackson?
Yeah, I think just to echo what Clare said, we love our friends and family very deeply, including those that are still believing Mormons. These stories, they didn't happen in a vacuum. And so, yeah, they're going to include some people in our life, but the intention is not to make anyone feel bad. And we're going to be really respectful of everyone that still does believe in our lives. And then two, I think Clare is really kind of the hero of this story. So I'm here to support her on this. I was a little bit of a side character, but just really excited to see what she has to share today. So those are kind of my intentions.
Beautiful.
We find you to be a bit of a hero too, though.
Well,
I have
thank you.
to say, maybe both of you in your own ways. Yes.
Thanks, Margie.
We had pizza last night.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, let's dive in. So, who wants to go first?
What do you think?
I think you should start.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great.
So, where does your Mormon story begin, Clare?
For me, it's just as a child growing up, really loving devout Mormon home, and I had a great childhood. But there's a piece of my childhood, like the thread that connects through my whole story has a lot to do with anxiety. I developed a lot of anxiety as a child, a lot of OCD behaviors and scrupulosity, and something that I suffered with a lot as a child and a preteen and a teenager, and I didn't even really know that it was happening. It was so normal to me. And
how would it manifest?
It manifested through a lot of like mental rumination as well as physical acts. So prayer was a really stressful thing for me. Every night I had this like big night routine where I would start by praying and I'd go through a whole laundry list of items that I was asking God for. And it was all things that I was afraid of. Like health-wise, my dad traveled a lot when I was a kid, and I would get a lot of anxiety when he was gone. And so like that something terrible would happen to him. And so I would pray, like, and it was always like, I had to say something like a number of times, like, please bless that my dad will be safe, like a handful of times. And it was that with a whole other list of things. And I felt like if I didn't beg God enough for it, it wouldn't be enough for him to answer my prayers. So it was a whole laundry list of things. And then after that, it was a lot of physical acts. So like, for example, after my parents would go to bed, I would go out into the kitchen. I had a lot of, what's the word? Like intrusive thoughts that I was afraid of sinning, like doing something bad. And I was afraid of hurting somebody in my family, like while I was sleeping, and like with knives or something. And so I'd go in the kitchen, and all of the drawers that had knives in them, I would press my hands against them like really, really hard until my hands hurt. And I knew like I couldn't stop doing it until I was in pain. And then I felt like I had put enough like effort into like being sure, like, okay, the drawer is closed. I'm not going to come out here like in the night. It's not like been left open. I would do the same thing to like checking locks, to my bedroom door. Yeah. Am I forgetting anything else?
Just like the scanning of the ceiling that you would do.
I was like just very concerned about safety. I developed a lot of health anxiety, particularly around cancer, that became very triggering to me. I don't know why in particular, just something that I latched onto.
They say OCD often has a genetic component. It's something that we can just, at least in some ways, be born with, you know, in addition to ways that maybe a high demand religion or an upbringing can kind of exacerbate it.
Yeah,
but
for
sometimes
sure.
it's partly just what we're born with.
Yeah, there's a lot of predisposition in my family, I think, for OCD and some mental health.
Yeah. And when, I guess, just for those who want to understand the scrupulosity idea, it's religious OCD. OCD tends to attack whatever you care about most. So if you care about your safety or your health or your family or your religion, that's what OCD is going to go after. So it sounds like that's what happened to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, when you look back on your Mormon childhood, you know, there's always the songs and the primary and the activities. I'm wondering, you know, how it was for you in terms of like enjoyment versus being terrorized by the OCD attaching itself to your religiosity.
I would say overall it was very enjoyable. I enjoyed going to church, and music's a huge part of my life. I love singing, and so I loved that as a child. But definitely there were some things like talk around the second coming, and like, you know, you read about all of the natural disasters and scary things that are going to happen in the last days. That was always like really scary to me. 72-hour kits. My family always did those like twice a year with General Conference, and that would always stir up some anxiety. Like, so for the most part, it was a comforting thing, I feel like, and something that I liked, but definitely some hard things to deal with as well.
What, where were you in terms of birth order, siblings, and what city, state were you raised in, if you want to share?
Yeah, I grew up in Centerville, Utah.
Okay.
Davis County. Went
So
to
it's
Viewmont
north
High.
of Salt Lake, kind of right before Ogden, is that?
Yeah, it's right next to, it's in between Bountiful and Farmington.
Okay.
So yeah, and I'm the second in my family.
Out of how many total?
Out of 4.
Okay. And you said last night over pizza that in some ways Davis County can actually be more intense than Utah County. Is that possible?
I feel like it is. Just I grew up, spent 18 years of my life in Davis County, and I've lived in Utah County for 5 years now, and I feel like the intensities are different, but I feel like it's a little bit more in Davis County.
How? Give me some. Do you have any examples of how that's even possible?
I don't know. I feel like,
I mean, I guess Utah County has a university which sometimes can bring some liberal tendencies or intellectual tendencies. I don't know if that's part of it. I know Davis County has Weber, but
Yeah, maybe that's it. I think, at least in like the area that I grew up in, I feel like it was more like established, older families and people. And so maybe that had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So anything else about your childhood before we go to adolescence in terms of big things happening or family stuff or anything?
I don't think so. I think
I have just a general kind of question around you and your childhood. Did you feel, as you're describing yourself and how you coped, I think as a child, it feels quite, even though you say that, you know, there was some enjoyment, it feels quite serious. Were you, like when you think of yourself as a girl now, do you feel like you were a very serious-minded girl? Do you feel like you were, you know, quite obedient, and as opposed to like, I don't know, playful or, you know, kind of more lighthearted? How, when you're looking back at yourself, what do you remember about yourself as a girl?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. My mom always used to say that I was like a 90-year-old woman trapped in a tiny body. Like I was always very serious, very mature, very concerned about adult things and wanted to grow up faster than I was growing up. That being said, I do feel like I was a playful child and I had a good imagination, but I can never remember a time in my life where I wasn't concerned about like the future, big things, or like how people perceived me. Like I was very aware of like, how am I being perceived? Am I acting mature? Am I being obedient? Like how am I coming off to people? It was very concerning to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Do you view yourself as being quite social, or were you more introverted, or a blend? I mean, did you enjoy school?
Yeah, I think I was pretty social. I'm a little bit more of an introvert, but I always had a lot of friends. I didn't have a hard time making friends. I feel like most of my anxiety that I felt was at home.
Yeah.
I didn't really, that I can remember, feel a lot like at school. I enjoyed being around my peers and probably just feeling like a kid.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Can I say something about you as a kid? Not that I knew you, but from the stories I hear from her parents, Claire was also very. She had to know why, right? She was very curious, and you couldn't just say, "Don't do that," because I told you not to do that. You had to have a good reason for not doing that or doing that. So she always wanted to know the reasons behind why something was the way that it was.
Yes, wanting a deeper understanding of how things work and why you're being asked to do what you're. Yeah,
absolutely. It was very important to me.
Share your carrot story.
My carrot story. This is just kind of a silly example, but
it ties into religion and belief.
It does.
Yeah. It's a little more lighthearted though. I really didn't want glasses when I was a kid, and I remember like hearing, I'm sure my mom just kind of nonchalantly like trying to get us to like eat carrots, was like, "Oh, these are really healthy for you. Like they're good for your eyes. Like there's a vitamin in them or something that helps with your eyes." And so I went through a phase where I would eat a ton of carrots and then pray every night, like, "Please bless that I won't have to get glasses. I really don't want glasses. I'm eating all of these carrots, like taking care of my body." And then I got glasses in 7th grade. So that was a prayer that God didn't answer, and probably the first prayer that I can think of that he didn't answer.
And do you remember what you thought about that at the time? This idea that, wow, I really prayed for that thing?
I think I was disappointed, like, and confused. Like, okay, I really prayed. I not only prayed, but I did the works, right? Like I was eating the carrots. I was being healthy, and just disappointment. But then it was like so quick to be like, okay, but it's not God's will, and I meant to have glasses, and bodies aren't perfect, and like I don't think I ever let myself like really go too far down the thought process of like, why did this happen?
Yeah.
And you mentioned in your outline the scripture in Matthew 5:48, being really influential. I remember this hit me a lot too. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Just how it says, be therefore perfect. And I obsessed over that up until, I still struggle with that, but my whole life, it was just so important to me to be the best that I could be. And it manifested in a lot of different ways, but I just really desired to be the best version of myself and to be holy and perfect. And they always talk about in church, like, oh, we can't really be perfect here. And that was confusing to me because it was like, well, then why does it say in the scriptures to be perfect? Because and it sounds like it's not possible. And no matter how much I try or pray or repent, I'm still not perfect.
Yeah. And it's Jesus saying it. It's not like it's, some sub-prophet or something.
Yeah. It's like, that sounds like a commandment.
Yeah.
Do you feel like when you did make mistakes, do you remember how you felt when you did make a mistake? Was that kind of a trigger for you to pray and try to really ask for forgiveness, or what was your response with your own humanity?
I think it was triggering to me. I'm a very emotional person, very vulnerable with my emotions, and that came across, I think, as being kind of a difficult child as far as expressing my emotions. I had a hard time with that, and so I would feel a lot of guilt after doing something, maybe not agreeing with my parents or something. I felt a lot of guilt and tried to repent from that, but I never felt like I was getting any better, it wasn't enough. So, and then at church they tell you to you should be repenting every night. I can't remember, I feel like there was a talk that came out at some point that was you should be going through your day at the end of the day and accounting before God and repenting of all of your mistakes. And that stressed me out a lot.
Yeah. It's like you go to pray and it's okay, I got to remember them all. And if I forget one, then maybe I won't, I won't get, God can't just kind of remember it and cut you some slack.
Yeah.
Anyway, it can be really stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So into your, adolescence, that's when kind of the modesty lessons and young women start emerging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Really heavily based on modesty. I don't know. Obviously at church they talked about it. And it was a big emphasis in my home growing up as well. And I just remember becoming as you're a teenage girl going through puberty, you become very aware of your body and the changes that are happening. And it's very confusing and weird because I never ever wore tank tops or short shorts ever until I was 28 years old. Never in my life, even as a child. And so I was so used to okay, we cover up our bodies as women and as girls, and it's our responsibility to do this for the men. I started to develop a feeling of I need to control the men's thoughts around me, which made me uncomfortable around men and made me feel icky towards men. Shouldn't they be able to control their own thoughts? Aren't they responsible and accountable for their own thoughts? And just develop some shame around my body, but I wouldn't have identified it as shame at the time. I just felt a lot of judgment, growing up, oh, so-and-so, her skirt's too short at church. Did you see that? Or her shirt was too tight, or so-and-so mows the lawn without, if it was a man without a shirt on, or a woman with a tank top, and I took that very seriously, and it was very confusing to me, kind of going back to what Jackson said, why would they do that if they know that they should be wearing their garments? And I was taught prepared to go through the temple and wear only clothing that you could wear with garments.
Yeah, we are so hyper-focused on how people dress, and I think it makes us obsessed about body parts because we're constantly body checking everybody. I think it makes the problem worse. Right?
1000%, I think.
Yeah.
Do you feel like with the perfectionism piece, do you feel like you had that at all with your own body, with the way that you viewed your body, especially as your body was kind of changing at all? Were you critical about or aware of how your body looked, or was it more about the covering of it? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, I was never really unhappy with my body. It was more, don't even get to know my body, like just cover it up. Like this isn't, not really like my own almost.
That's
like,
right. So it disconnected you.
Yeah.
And then your health anxiety continued, is that right?
Yeah, it got really, really bad. As a teenager, just like kind of became a germaphobe and started to develop a fear around cancer for whatever reason. I'm not sure what triggered that. And then that became a big issue going into my young adult and adult years, and played a part with some struggle in our marriage as well, kind of later on.
And talk about how in adolescence your OCD started infecting your prayers even more in terms of ritualistic praying and stuff like that. I mean, that's a classic symptom of scrupulosity or OCD is ritualistic praying.
Yeah, every night kneeling by my bed, I would fall asleep saying my prayers and then panic waking up because I hadn't finished, and then going through the physical acts. And then it became like, okay, now I'm doing a second round of praying, laying in bed. And it was like this whole process before I could ever fall asleep because I felt so much anxiety. I couldn't relax. I just had to go through so many ruminations before I felt like I could take on the next day, or like I felt like I had to like fix myself. Like, why am I having a hard time with this? And it was not a restful experience. It just became a big stressful routine every night.
So exhausting.
Yeah.
In Claire's childhood home growing up, there's a sign that says, pray like everything depends on God and work as if everything depends on you. It might be
Right.
might be the reverse of that. I can't remember anyway. But
Yeah.
the act of praying almost, in Claire's mind, tell me if I'm wrong, was almost an act of work as well. Like something that you had to put a lot of effort into. It wasn't just asking some divine being for help. It was almost sacrificial, self-sacrifice in an act of prayer. Am I off base
that's a
there?
good way to put it.
Yeah, it's almost like I'm going to work so hard that I will suffer.
Yeah,
And my
absolutely.
suffering will be this, evidence of how hard I work, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really quickly, what were you into in high school? Hobbies, interests, what future did you see for yourself such that you were preparing for it in high school, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I knew that I always wanted to be a mom. And I knew that I wanted to be a teacher. So those were kind of my long-term goals, but I had a really, really great group of friends, 3 girls that I was incredibly close with, and they were really good anchors. And I was really into music. I was in choir, theater, and I found a lot of joy and fulfillment doing that.
Did you do musical theater?
I was in one musical my senior year.
Which one?
It was Fiddler on the Roof.
Nice.
Oh, that's
Were you one
fun.
of the sisters?
Yeah, I was the oldest one.
How did I know?
Probably because I give off older sister energy.
What was her name?
Oh, Seidel or something
That's right.
like that. I might be wrong, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
Matchmaker. Is that your song?
Yep. Yep. We all sing that.
All right.
All right, can I ask you a question about that? When it came to theater or some of the things that you enjoyed, were you able to have a respite from your head?
Yeah.
Were there moments where you were able to actually kind of get outside your brain kind of yelling at you all these, threatening, terrifying thoughts? what were they? Where were you able to kind of find a respite from that?
Yeah, definitely. The music helped that. Like I said, I was in choir all through junior high and high school, and I took voice lessons, and it was a really important, big part of my life. And that music resonates with me, gives me peace, helps kind of get rid of the static. And so I definitely felt free when I was participating in choir and just spending time like with my friends away from the home. And I don't want to say that as in like my home wasn't a safe place for me or anything to do with my parents, but I just felt like because all of those rituals happened at home, it wasn't like I don't want to say not safe, but it wasn't like a mentally safe, calming space for me because it was so hyper-focused on the rituals and the praying. And
yeah, I mean, in many ways, that's part of the genius of Mormonism, I think, is that, you know, the way it's constructed is that the religion lives with you. It's the family becomes the, you know, the proctor, what is it called? When it would be like church, but at home. The family just reproduces all that. So in essence, you go to church on Sunday, you have activities, but also your family structure oftentimes is an imitation of the church structure, just at home. So it really makes sense to me that you would feel that way, especially with a devout family, someone who's really kind of taking the church seriously in that way. Can I ask you a question around Young Women's? Mm-hmm. So what was your experience of Young Women's at the time? Did you really enjoy it? And also, what are some of the main messages that you feel like really landed for you at that time?
Yeah, I was really lucky. The neighborhood ward that I grew up in, there was like 12 of us who were all the same age. And we all got along. There was like rarely any drama for the most part. We're all pretty close. So I'm lucky in that I had a really good experience with Young Women's. It was a fun place to go. And for me, like looking back, it's interesting how much focus there was on preparing to get married and to be a mom. But I loved it at the time because I was like, this is all I want. This is all I care about. And so I thrived like there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the majority of my memories from Young Women's were focused on preparing to be a mother and a wife and bettering yourself, the Christ-like attributes, personal progress, you know, like just becoming a better person, the best person that you can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have one final question around this kind of time period. And I think the reason why I'm asking this is because I do think, and Mormonism isn't the only religion, high demand religion this way, but because it's so behavior focused, it's so much about what it looks like as opposed to what it feels like. I'm curious, to me it feels like you have this private kind of tortured experience, right? Do you feel like the external, what you showed to the world in high school and your friendships and the people who knew you, do you think they had a sense for what you were going through on the inside, or were you quite isolated in that?
That's a good question. I don't know if I've ever really thought about that. I think maybe aside from, like I mentioned, my really, really close friends, they might have known a little bit, but I'm not even sure really. I think they just knew me so well. They probably knew like my personality leaned more towards that like obsessiveness, but for the most part, it was very internal, private thing that I dealt with. And looking back, I'm not even sure how much my parents knew. Like they knew that I struggled, and they did things to help me, but yeah, nobody really knew. And that's why I felt so free at school around those people, because I felt like that was like the authentic part of me, the part that I wanted to feel all the time. That was so freeing.
Yeah.
I'm always conflicted because we come down hard on, I think, some of the harmful aspects of the church, but at the same time, I have to remind people there are way worse ways to be raised than devout Mormon. And so even with my own kids, sometimes I think, well, sometimes standards put too much pressure, but sometimes they just keep people out of trouble and give them something to strive for. And I think we all probably feel like, you know, we turned out at least okay, at least many of us. Do you ever reflect back on like, yeah, maybe it was hard, maybe it was stressful, but maybe overall it was better for you than the alternatives? And I think it's a different thing when somebody has OCD and scrupulosity, because the type of pressure that can just be constructive for some can become possibly damaging or even deadly for others. So I'm curious how you reflect on that looking back in terms of your adolescence.
Yeah, I think I fall into the category of, even though like there were hard things about the culture of the church and the church that helped accentuate things that maybe I was predisposed to, for the most, like I can 100% say like I had a good childhood. The church was built for somebody like me who thought the way that I thought, and I really thrived, and I enjoyed gaining a testimony. I loved studying the scriptures. Literally that's what I would do for fun, was read my scriptures and read like grown adult books like about the gospel. Like I loved that. And I feel like I have a lot in my life to be grateful for because of the way that I was raised. And yeah.
Jackson, why were you laughing when she said she studied the scriptures for fun?
It's who I married, you know. I married a girl that loved the gospel. She really did. And it's sweet. You know, I you know, there's still that part of her. I'll come home and she's studying something, right? Reading a book or listening to a podcast. And I love that about her. She doesn't dabble, right? She goes into things. And I don't know, it's really endearing to me. So I don't know that it was a laugh that it's funny, like, haha, nerd reading the scriptures. It's more of an endearing laugh for me. Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, should we turn to Jackson's story a little bit?
Let's please do.
All right. Jackson, what was your Mormon upbringing like?
Yeah, very similar to Claire. I grew up in a very devout Mormon family.
Were you in Ogden, North Davis County? You know?
So I was born in Davis County, actually, okay. But most of my childhood was spent in Highland, Utah.
So that's Utah County.
Yep, North
that's
Utah
near
County.
Alpine, and
yep.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah, some would say that's kind of the epicenter of Mormonism these days, especially, but even then, So I grew up in a neighborhood. It was probably 3 streets made up our ward, and there was not a single inactive family on those 3 streets.
Wow.
Every single person in our ward went
so
to church.
Notable.
Basically every Sunday.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, you know.
Alpine tends to be more affluent. Like Senator Mike Lee used to live there up until recently. The guy who wrote those Mormon history books, I always forget his name. What's his name? The Way and the Glory.
Lund?
Gerald Lund.
Gerald Lund.
He's from Alpine?
He lives in Alpine, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Because he's in my brother's ward.
Yeah.
A lot of wealthy, super righteous families are in Alpine. Yeah.
For sure. And Highland, I don't think was necessarily that way when I was growing up. I grew up in a very normal neighborhood. Yeah. But the church, to your point, it's more than a religion. It's a culture and it's a network. So business deals are done in the chapel, you know, almost. It's a very...
oh, really?
It's very... You know, for people that believe in an afterlife where you can't take money with you, money is a very, very big part of the church in Utah County. So really weird subculture.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I grew up. So I'm the oldest of 4. I've got 2 younger brothers and then a baby sister. And of my family, I have left the church publicly. My sister has left the church publicly, and my dad has as well. So we're about, 6 of us, 3 of the 6 are not in the church and 3 of the 6 are. So, which is fairly fitting, I would say, because I grew up in a pretty nuanced family. My grandma and grandpa on my mom's side are kind of in a mixed faith marriage situation. And then my grandpa on my dad's side is actually a convert to the church. So I grew up more in I guess, I was never necessarily taught that this is the one true church,
Wow.
which I think inoculated me against a lot of the like truth claim things that really bothered Claire at first. Because I was like, this is just kind of what we do, This is
It's
our
a
religion,
culture.
right?
It's like
exactly.
being Jewish
Yep.
for like a liberal Jew kind of thing. Yeah.
And my dad grew up in Texas, in Houston, Texas, so he was always one of maybe 2 or 3 Mormons, right? You know that, John. So it wasn't, he didn't grow up kind of with the same dogma that Claire's family, when everyone is in and everyone's bought into it, had.
Okay. Yeah. So, do we go to adolescents now and young men's?
Yeah, I think there's one funny little experience when I was a kid that I wanted to share. Despite not necessarily thinking this is the one true church, I grew up where everyone was Mormon. So my experience was everyone was Mormon, right? But I had a babysitter one time, and she never babysat again after this. She got in trouble, but we had peas for dinner while my parents were gone. And she grabbed one pea and showed it to me and said, it represents the amount of members in the church. If the plate that your dinner is on is the entire world, this little pea is the amount of members of the church that there are.
That was a babysitter.
That was a babysitter, yeah.
It's like a Mormon nightmare babysitter.
Yeah. And I would have been like, I don't know, maybe 10 or something like that. I don't know.
It's like, alert, infiltrated
Yeah.
into the bubble.
So my parents go home like, is this true? And my
I want to
parents-
meet this woman. Do you know her name?
I know her last name.
We shouldn't out her, but
Yeah.
if you're watching, we want to meet you. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's trying to say y'all aren't so special.
Well, she was Mormon
relatively
too. I don't really
insignificant.
know what she was trying to say.
Okay.
I think she was just.
She was maybe in the
She was like
midst of it.
13
I was
or
going to
14.
say, maybe she's grappling.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think she just thought it was cool that she knew that, maybe.
Yeah.
That was
I
the
had those
sense that
thoughts
I
at
got.
14.
Yeah.
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 I call it doing the math. You divide the number of Mormons by the total number of people in the world, and you get like less than 1/2 of 1%. And you're
Right.
like, wait, this is God's one true chosen people?
Right. So that was kind of a disturbing thought to me. So I asked my parents, like, is this true? And yeah, she got in trouble.
How old were you? Do you remember?
I think I would have been like 8 to 10, old enough that I really distinctly remember it's the first time I ever experienced cognitive dissonance, though I didn't have the word for it, obviously, at the time. I remember how it made me feel,
Right.
which was disturbed mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So can I get a sense for you as a boy? We kind of did this with Claire. Describe, what do you remember about yourself as a boy? What you enjoyed? Were you super obedient? Were you very rules oriented? Were you more kind of fun loving? How would you describe as a boy now how you approached kind of your family system and life? Yeah,
I think I was more of the latter, kind of a fun loving, definitely a bender of rules. My childhood, I kind of compare it to like the Calvin and Hobbes cartoons,
We
like
love
I just like
those.
really loved being outside and running around and playing make believe, and definitely got into some mischief too. Have a lot of scars from it, and yeah, I was a fun loving kid. I didn't really have a care in the world, and
Yeah.
I love my parents for giving me that childhood because I was able to explore. I was able to ask questions. I was very curious. And I think my ability to be who I was as a child, I think has shaped who I am today. So I am very grateful for my childhood.
Yeah, that's rarer.
Okay. Adolescence?
Sure.
Okay.
This is where it starts to get a little, no, just kidding. Yeah. So
I don't think you're kidding.
no, I'm not, unfortunately. Yeah. So, kind of moving out of childhood and into adolescence, I took getting the priesthood very, very, very seriously. My dad instilled like a real respect for the priesthood in my mind at that age. And so when I became a deacon and got the priesthood, it's the first thing I think I took seriously in my life. I didn't ever take school seriously as a kid. I would read the scriptures talking about the Aaronic priesthood and realize what a responsibility it was, right? And in my mind, I was becoming a man, right, at 12. So it was a very serious thing to me. I remember distinctly, I got the priesthood, and then my dad took me to general conference. So my birthday's October 1st. So I turned 12, I get the priesthood, and that priesthood session, whenever that would have been that year, that Saturday, my dad took me. And I remember, like, in the priesthood session, it was like every other talk was about pornography. I swear, you've been to priesthood sessions. They talk about it a lot. I had no idea what that was. So like the word kind of made me feel weird. I was like, what is that? It's a weird word, but I didn't know what it was. It was also during the time that personal priesthood interviews were a big thing. I don't know if you remember those, the PPIs. Yeah. You've probably done a PPI or two with your kids. Of course, yeah. So,
well, first of all, I was just going to say, Mormon parents are kind of in a bind because you want to warn your kids not to look at pornography, but you don't want to give them the idea to look at it.
Right.
So you can say stay away from it, but then you don't actually explain what it is because then they'll be curious. So it's kind of weird, right? That dynamic.
Yeah, and that's just what I was about to say is I feel for my dad because he's having this PPI and the prophet's telling him, look, you got to talk to your 12-year-old about this,
Like find out if your kids are looking at porn, ask them if they masturbate, in a little one-on-one fatherly or father-daughter, father-son interview, like being a mini bishop, basically. In the home,
Yeah.
Mark, you just groaned. Why did you groan?
I feel like it's obvious. I don't know. It's just incredibly, if you don't have that type of relationship of speaking openly, it becomes just very uncomfortable. And as opposed to like educational and conversational, it's like this reporting. All of a sudden, like you're feeling like
worthiness, like parental,
so much is on the
enforced
line.
Gospel worthiness.
So anyway, sorry.
No, that's 100% it. And I had a great relationship with my dad always, it's never been bad. And I've always felt like I could really talk to him about anything. I think I'm lucky in that sense, but it was weird. And he sat me down in my room and was like, look, I'm the patriarch of the house, and this is... It's all so silly to me now.
Claire is silently groaning.
Don't forget, I'm the patriarch, okay? But sits me down and kind of goes through some things. We talk about, I think, tithing, some other things. And then he goes, all right, son, I need to know, do you masturbate? Sorry, this isn't that funny, but now I'm laughing about it.
Coping.
Yeah, that's right.
Coping is coping.
And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, Dad, I don't know what you're talking about, and I think that finally like kind of snapped him out of the spell of like, I'm supposed to be doing this. And so I think he kind of tried to explain a little bit what it was. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And so it just kind of ended at that. So I was introduced, to the idea of this stuff in a pretty strange way, I would think.
That's a guaranteed way to get your kid going if they're not already going.
Yeah.
Just to like tell them what the word is and ask them if they're doing it. And try to explain it in an awkward way.
Right.
They're doing it next week. You know what I mean?
Well, and all it gave me was weird words to talk about with my friends, And so because I already kind of had that rebellious nature to me, now I'm going and at baseball practice, I'm like, hey, have you heard of this word? You know? And then I'm learning about pornography and masturbation, really learning about it from peers, not from people that would have a little bit of wisdom around it to share with me.
Yeah.
a good
14-year-old
point.
boys become your educators.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the blind leading the blind right there. Is what that is.
Well, it does make you blind. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So can I ask so clearly, but I just want to be extra clear.
Sure.
Your first kind of experience with hearing about and learning about masturbation would you say it was in a shame way? It was like, this is a doozy. This can do you in,
Yeah.
right? Was it like that?
Absolutely. And that's a great call out. And I think I glossed over that is it was not talked about in, hey, this is something that you're probably going to want to do. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
It was, do not do this under any circumstances. And so you're left, you know, so this was when I was 12. I still didn't really understand it until I was exposed to like real pornography the first time at a friend's house when I was 14.
Mormon friend, right?
Mormon friend. Yep. He was a really good friend too. And it wasn't something that we were looking for. It was like a pop-up on a computer, right? We were playing computer games together and it was just like,
Yep.
you know, I don't even think I registered what it was. It was like very jarring. So I didn't even necessarily have any experience with it until I was 14, but I just knew that it was really, really bad. And they don't give you, for lack of a better term, any other option. Like this is bad. Here's what you should do instead, right? Like you can't have sex and you can't look at pornography and you can't masturbate. And unfortunately, I think this is where the most damage occurs. This is opinion, but pornography and masturbation are tied together, right? They're both just as bad as the other, and you can't do one without the other. So I didn't know that you could just masturbate and that could be a
Form of
fulfilling
release.
Sexual experience that's okay to have as an adolescent, you know, and I just didn't know that. I just thought it was bad, right? So
Well, from the church's perspective, they're both forbidden.
Right.
They're both equally bad.
Yep.
And again, they're all associated in the church's mind.
Yep.
They come together. So yeah, there's no such thing as healthy masturbation, even if pornography is not involved.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the church is never going to come out and say, hey, well, maybe they will. They change all sorts of stuff, it seems like. But up until now, they haven't come out and said, hey, you know, masturbation is actually no big deal. Yeah. And actually, it's kind of biologically necessary for you to do this.
Maybe even healthy.
Right.
Healthier than a lot of the other options
things.
that you could go to, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's no education, there's no tools given to parents to talk about these things. So like, I think that's why I was laughing about the thing with my dad, because I'm putting myself in his shoes and like, what would I have said, you know, like probably the exact same thing. So there's no tools for parents around these things in the church. And again, then it means you're turning to pornography as a source of sex education, and you're turning to peers as a source of sex education. And that is much less healthy than what it could be.
So how did that progress for you into your
So I felt horrible about it, being exposed to it, but it was like nothing I had ever experienced before. And so I wanted more of it. And so I didn't have a smartphone until I turned 18. So it wasn't like this readily accessible thing for me. It was when I could get a few minutes alone on the family computer. It was, you know, finding magazines, you know, in friends' houses and things like that.
And it's teaching you how to be sneaky.
Exactly.
And to hide and to lie, right?
And it reinforces shame, the shame of it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm like, I am certainly the only one in my ward that's doing this. Maybe the only person in Utah that's doing this, you know, these are the thoughts that are going through my head. And I can't, I just got to stop it was always like, okay, that is the last time I do that. I cannot do this again. And then when you do it again, then it's like this death spiral of shame, and it never ends. And you just feel worse and worse and worse and worse and worse about yourself. It compounds, right? So, that went on for a little bit. And then I got caught. I didn't know how to clear browser history on my family computer because literally I just didn't know anything, I was a young kid. And I got home from a mutual activity. We went to see the Orem Owls play for mutual. And again, I don't have a cell phone, so I'm just there hunky-dory, unbeknownst to me that I'm getting caught, and I walk in the door and my mom's crying and my dad is mad. And he said, "Son, I need you to prepare your heart right now to tell me what you've been doing. I'm going to give you a couple minutes and meet me downstairs." And I knew exactly what it was about. So, it was, a pretty shameful experience for sure. From there, I went and talked to my bishop, which was humiliating. But I felt good about having the courage to go talk about it, because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. So it was not necessarily a totally negative experience. But then, of course, the very next opportunity I had to search out pornography again, I did it, even though I had confessed it to the bishop. So now it's not, I'm the only person in my ward that does this. I'm the only person in Utah that probably does this. Now I'm the only person that has ever in the history of mankind confessed to a bishop that I've done this and then gone back to it, Yeah. And that was like a level of self-hatred that I don't even know how to describe to someone that hasn't been there before. It's very deep and it's very painful.
Did you ever feel during that time that, because it's kind of occurring to me, just, I don't know, a lack of privacy, a lack of this sense of having your own relationship with a part of yourself that's not for everyone to sort of comment about, or, have it be now part of your character or identity that people kind of associate with you? Did you feel at that time any sense for boundary? This feels really exposing. Something's wrong here. Why is everyone in on this really personal thing? Did you have a sense for that at the time at all?
I don't know that I consciously had a sense for that. I think it did feel wrong, right? But everyone around me, all the adults in my life, were saying one thing about this. And so I trusted that, right? Yeah. And again, there's so many more healthy ways to learn about these things. And there's no reason a 14-year-old boy should have to talk about that with a stranger. There's just no reason for it. And it was humiliating. And, I got my privilege to take the sacrament revoked and prepare the sacrament, because I was a teacher at the time, for I think 4 weeks or something like that. So not only do I feel bad about it, now everyone knows, basically, because what else would it be, right? Because
the other boys know you're not passing or blessing the sacrament. Your leaders know. Yep. How does that feel?
Oh, it's humiliating. I remember distinctly one Sunday getting called by our teachers' quorum president, "Hey, I need you. We don't have a lot of guys this week. I need you to come. Not only prepare it, but we don't have enough deacons either. We need you to help pass it." And
this is a 14-year-old boy,
right.
14 to 15-year-old boy, right?
Right. He's one of my peers, he's a little bit older than me, so I think he's a god, first of all, but Second of all, I don't want to tell my friends that I can't do that,
Yeah.
And so it was humiliating, and I just froze. I didn't even say anything. I just handed the phone to my dad, and my dad explained, he can't right now, So it was, it was humiliating.
And so defining.
Yeah.
It feels like also what I'm realizing, not necessarily an original thought, but is just how it reinforces at every turn that this thing is defining for you.
Yep.
Which then recreates the circle. Because if it is defining, then you become part of that thing. It's
Yeah.
like, well, this is who I am, And so it kind of reinforces that whole cycle of shame and puts you kind of back in that. Again, it's just exhausting.
Yeah. And working in therapy, one of the things that we've worked on is going back to our younger selves and having that conversation and just saying it's okay,
Yes.
And
Like
that
telling
was
your child, your
Yeah.
adolescent self.
Mm-hmm.
And almost what you wish you could have heard,
Yeah.
what he deserved to hear.
right.
What
in
would
that
you
moment.
What would you have told yourself then?
I would have had the conversation that I wish my dad had the tools to give me at that age, right? It's okay to masturbate. This is when and how, right? It's not appropriate all the time, right? But it is appropriate sometimes, and it's something personal and private to you. This is what pornography is. These are websites that you should really avoid because there's things on there that you don't understand right now that you don't need to be exposed to, right? And just go through and have that conversation, and then finally just say, it's okay, you're not broken. Actually, everyone's doing this. You're the only one that has been forced to be honest about this.
Including bishops, by the way.
Including the bishop that you
Yes.
told about it,
Yeah.
right?
And
That's
your
right.
dad,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And now I think about that, and I'm like, my
And maybe
poor
your
dad,
mom,
yeah. It's just, it's so unhealthy for everyone involved,
Yeah.
because I know that was so hard on my dad too, because I know how that would have made him feel, having to have that conversation with me. So
I want to have you read. You have your outline, right? The one
Yeah.
you gave us. Where you start by saying, "I remember feeling." No. This continued. The part where it says "this continued." Can you read from that point, just for the next, couple sentences? I just think it's really well written. So, you say, "This continued through all my teenage years."
okay, sorry, it's like 26 pages long. Okay, yep, got it.
Go ahead
Okay.
and I'll tell you when to stop.
Yep. This continued through all my teenage years into my 20s. My shame was the first thing I thought of when I woke up in the morning, and it was the last thing I thought about before bed each night. Compound this with some very innocent sexual encounters with girlfriends during high school, and I pretty much considered myself to be a sexual deviant by the time I was old enough to go on a mission.
So I thought that was. No, I'm not stopping you, but
So
I want you to keep going. But
powerful.
calling yourself a sexual deviant, thinking of yourself that way as an adolescent.
Yeah.
Claire, I'm noticing you're feeling something. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I just feel a lot of empathy and pain for him. It's something that I didn't understand until we've gone on this whole journey to really like understand what that could possibly feel like. And I can relate in a different way to the self-loathing and the shame and just the pain. So it's just really horrific to me that so many people feel that kind of self-loathing about themselves. And I just feel bad that he had to carry that for so long.
It's really cool that we can even sit here and talk about this. I'll just say that Claire's been through a lot with me. She's a good person.
What's interesting about both your stories in different ways, though, is that, Claire, you were talking about, you're racked with all these thoughts and quite tortured as a teen, right? Mm-hmm. For different reasons.
Yeah.
And you're in many ways at odds with your own body, saying you felt disconnected with it, in many ways didn't trust it because it was sort of this symbol for men to have thoughts about you, sexual thoughts that you felt responsible for, right? And that's not completely unlike what you're describing as well. You're feeling this sense of like, I don't trust my own body. I don't trust my own desires. I don't trust, right? And feeling this like, on some level, separation, and then being racked as well. And that's something you have in common in just really different, ways. Have you talked about that before and kind of realizing the similarity there?
Yeah, that's a huge kind of part of our journey together, because as I'm sure you can imagine, the pornography thing caused a huge issue. We don't fight about things. We don't even disagree about things. That's the only thing that ever caused a lot of pain for both of us. And I think we like fed into each other, because I think we both were understanding where the other person was coming from. I'm having this obsession with being perfect and not making mistakes and being obedient. And then I'm feeling like he's not living up to that. And then I'm feeding into his shame. And then I feel bad because I'm making him feel bad. It's just like this terrible cycle that we're going through, feeding into each other's insecurities.
Did you want to say something, Jackson?
No, I think, I think she said it well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then how does this, Jackson, for you, as you start thinking about a mission and you also think of yourself as a sexual deviant, how do you square that?
Yeah, I think, and Margie, you touched on this earlier, there's this side of you that you project out, and there's your inner self. So the side that I was projecting was confident, was excited to go on a mission, was worthy to go on a mission, right? Because I think I used the fact that I had talked to some bishops as like a crutch, like, look, I've put in the work, to fix this, Wasn't true, but that's what I kind of projected out. And so I guess I kind of made a deal with God, right? Like, look, I'm going to go out there and you've never seen a missionary work as hard as I'm about to work. That's what I told God. I'm about to go out there and I'm about to really give it all.
As the musical says, I'm going to be the Mormon who changes all mankind.
That's right. I was totally Elder Price. I was 100% Elder Price.
But do you feel like also part of that was to make up for this deep
Your
deficit
deviance,
That's exactly what it was for.
Yeah.
The deal was, I'm going to do this so that you will take this from me. Because I've really tried to stop.
On your own.
And I would really like for you to just take this from me, because apparently that's a thing, you'll just take it. Not sure why you're not. I would really like you to, but
and
so that was the deal.
We've talked about this so much on Mormon Stories, and I know the church watches Mormon Stories. They know it's a problem and they know they could change it.
Yep.
But I think I really do think they need youth feeling like they're broken.
Yep.
So that then they can feel like they need the church to make them whole, because they know now, 20 years into Mormon Stories, and we're not going to stop talking about this till the church changes, because it's a church-wide epidemic. It's very serious. It wrecks marriages. It wrecks, people's mental health. There's suicidal ideation. There's even suicide associated with all this. So it's very serious, and they could change it. But I think I think they worry that youth won't need the church or feel like they need the church if they got rid of this sexual shame thing,
I think it has to be one of the greatest evils committed by the church, one of the most evil doctrines that they have, because like you said, they give you a disease and they are the only source of a cure, right? They know their cure doesn't work. They know the disease is made up. And so it keeps people coming back. And I've seen myself trapped in that. I've seen people that I love trapped in that. I see people that I love that are still trapped in that. And if I could reach them and just say, you're okay, you're a good person.
Everybody's doing it,
Yeah. Like that I'm mostly over my angry phase at the church, but that sends me back into it because it's not good.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share about your adolescence, high school years before we jump to Claire's mission, I guess?
No, I think the only other thing that I would say about my adolescence is, despite what I wrote there, that it was the first thing that I would think about when I woke up, and the last thing that I would think about when I go to bed. That's very true. My entire experience as a Mormon adolescence was a positive one. The young men's program was pretty amazing. Still, when I was in it, we would go camping all the time, and I have lifelong friends from it. And so it's it's just that mixed bag that is growing up Mormon.
Yeah, it's
good and bad.
It's amazing and terrible.
It's amazing and terrible.
Paradox. Yep. Yeah, the paradox of the experience.
Yeah.
Can I just, to fill out your picture a little bit more?
Sure.
You're outward facing a little bit in high school.
Mm-hmm.
If we had dropped in and just seen you at high school or in your life, I think this is important because I think for many people, what they see is the truth, as opposed to, this is probably something we can assume about most humans. Is that what we see is actually just the tip of the iceberg. So
that's what we want people
we
to
now
see,
know kind of the inner you a little bit. But what was your experience in the outward world? What were you doing? What did you enjoy in high school? How would people have talked?
Yeah, I think I was just a fun-loving guy, and I think all my friends would have said that he just likes to have fun, and he likes to do things, and he likes to be outside. And when Claire was talking about, how music for her was a really healthy outlet, I had athletics and just doing things constantly outside with my friends. I just had a really, really, really good group of friends.
Wow,
and
that's great.
when I was feeling at my worst, they often lifted me up. And just by doing simple things like, hey, let's go play volleyball, let's go on a hike, and those friends to me are priceless for that reason, because they got me through a couple really dark times internally. Yeah. Oh, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Thank you.
So, all right. Should we go on to Claire's mission?
Let's do it.
Okay. So what year did you put in your papers?
Let's see. I went on my mission June 2015.
Okay.
So it would have been like around my birthday. My birthday's in February, so beginning of 2015.
So this would have been after President Monson lowered the age for women.
Yeah.
And there was a tsunami of young women going on missions.
Yep.
Before it was 21, they lowered it to 19 and encouraged, instead of just those who want to, basically encouraged all Mormon young women to become missionaries, largely because the number of male missionaries was dropping and the missionary force was shrinking. So they needed to pull women in. So how did you experience that? Do you remember when you first learned that you probably should go on a mission?
Yeah. I was definitely part of that wave of young women. I remember exactly where I was sitting that moment of hearing him make that announcement. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can do the wife thing and the mission thing. Like there's enough time now that I can squeeze in both. And so ever since, like after hearing that, I kind of had always planned, I think, on doing it. And I waited until I got my patriarchal blessing, hoping that would give me some more insight into whether I should go or not. And not shockingly, the blessing said, like, either path you take will be like good. Like, so it didn't really give me a specific answer like I wanted. And so anyway, it's kind of a longer story about how I ended up going. But I did end up deciding to follow through and go, and left behind somebody, and
Not me.
Not him. But yeah, it was hard to leave, but I was excited.
You were excited. Mm-hmm. Where did you go?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah. So what was your mission like, and how did you experience it? Was it fun? Was it hard? Was it good for you? Unhealthy?
All of the above, I think. Overall, I've said this even when I was a believing member, that the mission did more for me just like as developing me as a person, who I am, teaching me about the world and culture. It did more for me that way than it ever did spiritually. And I've said that since the day I came home from my mission. So in that sense, it was really incredible for me. I think I really kind of came into my own. But as far as mental health goes, it was really difficult. And it's kind of been an interesting thing for me to unpack, because if you would have asked me a year ago, 2 years ago, I would have kept saying like, oh my gosh, my mission was amazing. And while there were amazing parts of it, I never let myself unpack the difficulties that I felt, and a lot of the painful mental health issues that I was dealing with that I didn't even know I was dealing with. A lot of, I experienced, like we talked about, a lot of OCD and anxiety before my mission, but I never felt depressed ever in my life until my mission. Had never struggled with depression until my mission. Had never had an anxiety attack like to the level that I was having them on my mission. That was all new experience for me. And I didn't even know really what I was feeling. Lately, I've been going through some old mission journals, and I can see where I'm trying to talk about it, and I'm kind of like, what am I feeling? I don't feel good. I having a hard time working. Is this what it feels like to be depressed? Am I anxious? But then pushing that aside with like all the bubbly, like, this is who we're teaching. And it was a good mission, but it was hard. Like, we knocked doors all day long. Like, I found a journal entry lately that said, we knocked doors all day and only one person answered.
Yeah.
And that's what it was, like the majority of the time, just apartment complexes. We went back to visit, and I was like, I've knocked on every single door from as far as you can see. And that was hard, because the mission, at least when I was out, was a lot about the numbers. Your district leader's calling you every night, like, how many contacts did you get? And did you invite anybody to baptism? And so there was a lot of guilt and shame around not making the numbers, not meeting the goals, not inviting everyone you meet to baptism in the first conversation that you have with them. And I never felt good about that.
Yeah, that's wild.
But you were told by your mission president to challenge people for baptism
in
the first
lesson.
time you said hello?
Well, like in
basically?
the first lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you sit down, today we're going to teach you, would you like to be baptized?
Wow.
Yeah, pretty much.
Psychotic.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's how my mission
And that was a number, like we
Yeah.
kept track of that. We like would draw it in like in the mission planner.
Did they call it the golden question?
I don't remember
That's what it was
we
called.
called it.
For me, it was the
The
golden,
golden
question.
question.
We had like a little symbol that we would draw with like baptism waters and
Oh,
stuff.
totally. We drew that too. As like
Like-
little bumps and then
and
an
the arrow,
arrow.
yeah.
Yeah, we did that too.
So we used
Nice.
that to like identify that we've invited like this person to be baptized.
Funny.
Do you remember kind of early on, maybe when you did that initially the first time, or how the person responded to you inviting them to be baptized? Because the South, I mean, had you been to the South, by the way?
Never.
Before? Okay, so this is also the first time you're experiencing the South.
Yeah.
So how did they respond in that moment to you? Do you remember?
Well, for one, I was never one to really, it felt just weird to say that to people. I never really did it. Sometimes like, I think when I was being trained, maybe my trainer would like say it to a couple people, and it was just kind of like, it was either like an awkward, like, I don't know, or, well, maybe, but usually it was like, oh, I've already been baptized. That's just what you hear a lot down there. They're very obviously Christian people and very devout in their particular faith and the church that they go to. So most people would just say, oh, I've already been saved. And of course, then we would, you know.
But have you?
Yeah, but have you really? I don't know if you did it the right way. And
I'm a
we
little
have this special
concerned
power
for you
and
that
a
you
special
feel
authority.
like you have been
Yeah.
saved.
Yeah.
Did you have our special authority?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Your authority kind of doesn't count.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so that was awkward. It was hard. It was grueling. I mean, weirdly, we went through all that tracting grueling stuff. The church has since come out and admitted that tracting is a poor use of time.
Doesn't work. Yeah.
Yep.
And so but we all went through it. And in some ways, I think the church has known for a long time that the mission isn't so much about the converts, because so many converts fall away. Mm-hmm. It's about sealing your commitment, kind of like the masturbation conversation. Yeah. A mission is like a second opportunity for you to do something incredibly hard that's horrific in some ways, but then makes you feel extra committed to the organization, right? Yeah.
Totally. It like almost felt to me like a second baptism, almost like being like cleansed by fire, like in this sacrifice that I'm making. Like as a missionary, you compare yourself to like Alma the Younger and like other Book of Mormon characters, like having this defining moment in your life. And
the more you sacrifice for an organization, the more committed you end up feeling to the organization.
Yeah.
There's a huge sunk costs too. You're giving 18 months to 2 years of your life, and then to say, I don't know if this is for me after you've done that.
Yeah.
Right. Scary.
What were those 2 years for? You know,
Right.
that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
But like back to your discussion around mental health on your mission, the panic attacks, and that I remember reading in your outline, if you want to refer to it, feel free, where you talk about on the floor, you're on the tile floor.
Oh yeah, talk about that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I didn't have this realization, like I didn't define what that was until a couple months ago, actually.
Paint the picture.
Yeah, so it really, I feel like, started in my second area. So just to give some context, for the majority of my mission, I trained my companions. I think I had 2 companions. If any of you are listening and I didn't train you, I'm sorry. But the majority of companions I trained, and that gave me a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. This, in my second area, I didn't train this companion, but it was a really, really slow area. It was like a suburban area. Nobody was home because they were at work all day, and then they didn't want to talk to us at night. And so we were having no progress. I was homesick, and every morning during personal study, I would go to the bathroom and I would lay like on the cold tile floor. And I remember just like sobbing and praying. And then it became like this ritual. Like I can still see the floor and like the fuzzy shower mat that I would lay on. And I just couldn't even identify what I was feeling. I thought something was truly wrong with me. I thought that I carried a lot of guilt from like some harmless sexual encounters with the boyfriend that I had before I left on my mission. And I felt like I hadn't like repented enough, and I felt like I'm preventing us from like the work moving forward. So I would feel super depressed, and do that every morning. And then another area, I was training and opening up a new area to the mission and had no idea. We were just pretty much starting from scratch. And I can remember having a major panic attack in the middle of the night in that apartment, and doing it all, like feeling these things all alone, because I have my new trainee who's been out in the mission for 48 hours. I can't wake her up and be like, I'm having a mental breakdown. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, because I didn't want to freak her out. And that happened pretty regularly. It was a lot, but I didn't even realize what it was. I think I probably thought it was me. One, I'm broken. I'm not perfect enough. Something must be wrong with me, or it's Satan and he's just working really, really hard on me so that we're not having success.
Yeah, because when the church teaches you that if you don't baptize, it's because you're not worthy, and you're a perfectionist with OCD, scrupulosity, religious, OCD, that then you're basically feeling like you're preventing people's eternal salvation through your wickedness. And that's a recipe for a panic attack right there, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
And like when you'd go like take naps in the car, talk about that.
Yeah, like we would be so it's physically and mentally, spiritually draining. After knocking doors in Georgia southern heat, you know what that's like. It's really hot, and
Very
you're wearing a million layers and So we would go in the car to like cool down with the air conditioning, and then we'd be like, okay, we're just going to rest for 5 minutes, and then we'll like drive to another complex and start knocking on those doors. And then we would fall asleep for like not that long, like probably 20 or 30 minutes, and then wake up and just feel like so incredibly guilty because that's God's time that we wasted, and feeling like there was probably somebody who was home and we didn't knock on their door and now they're not there and it's a mischance.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you you hadn't had panic attacks before your mission, is that right?
I have no memory, at least not to that extent. Like definitely feeling the anxiety, but never anything like that.
So they're really terrifying, yes? Panic attacks.
Yeah.
So do you remember, how you approached having them? Did you try to hide the fact that you were having them? Did you try to reach out for help? Were you scared to have another one once you had one, that it was going to come on? Like, what was your approach around panic attacks in particular and your mental health?
I had no skills whatsoever for like how to deal with it, or not knowing, again, like I keep saying, I didn't know what it was. And there was one companion that I was particularly close with who I think kind of knew, not that I was having like anxiety attacks, but just that I was like more anxious. But I have no recollection of like bringing it up to my companions. It was like very internally dealt with, and I just sit there for hours, and it was just grueling, just suffering mentally.
And not your mission president?
No.
Okay.
He didn't know. He knew about I feel so guilty because of this before my mission. And that's another thing. Like I felt so much guilt that I went to my mission president and told him about like, again, this like harmless encounters that I'd had with a boyfriend. And that was embarrassing and weird because he was awkward about it. And then I didn't feel any resolution from that.
What do you mean he was awkward about it?
Well, it was just like, I was telling him like, well, this happened. And he just was like
I made out with a boy kind of thing.
Yeah. Like, and he was just like, ugh, like, I don't want to know this, but like this sense of like, he needed to hear me out because this is his duty.
You're paining him. He's in pain.
Yeah. Like that's what it felt like.
Okay.
And he's probably like, oh, great. Another one. Like, I don't know. And
you too.
Yeah. Like, I thought you were really good, Sister Owl.
Why did you do that?
Yeah. And then afterwards, like, I don't even remember what he said. He was I feel like he was just like, okay, thanks for telling me. Like, it's fine. You're good. But it wasn't like what I was expecting. And so I still
even that's insidious because the structure is a man has to let you know that you're okay with God, right? And there's
really
implications for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can't know that yourself
exactly
by your relationship with your deity. Mm-hmm. It takes a man in authority who you give money to let you know you're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even before I had made up my mind, like, okay, I'm going to go confess to my mission president, I had spent like a whole day in my apartment praying to be forgiven, because it was just eating at me again, like the scrupulosity and kind of that rumination. And like, okay, if I pray for this many hours, we didn't leave the house until like the afternoon that day, because I was just praying by the bed. And I was like, okay, if Enos could do this, like I can do this. It's Enos, right?
Enos, yeah.
And
he prayed all day, right?
Yeah. And then he was forgiven for his sins. And I was like, I'm going to have this incredible like wave of relief rush over me. And then it didn't happen. And so I talked to my mission president.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about your mission experience overall?
I think just one other thing to touch on that kind of comes back into our story later is starting to have some like pokes in my bubble of like
your testimony.
My testimony, like is this the one true church? Because all of these people are really happy and they really believe in God, and they're praying and they feel like their prayers are getting answered. They want to pray, or they want to pray for me, and
I need help.
I need help. As it turns out, I'm not okay. And one experience I'll share just really quickly. There was a food pantry in one area I was in, and this sweet Methodist couple ran it, and it was very successful. And you could see people's lives being blessed, like before your eyes, because they would come in and we helped get their food and take it out to their cars. And I just kind of remember thinking like, wow, we're really making a difference. And like our church is sitting empty. Like we're not not
part of this work.
Yeah, it was like very tangible feeling of like helping people. And I just didn't get that sense from the church.
Yep.
And then like we talked earlier about the church creating like an illness and then presenting itself as the solution. Eternal Families is another example of that, because I think you mentioned in your outline that everyone you talked to believed they had an eternal family. Is that right?
Yeah. I was like, we were like leading with like, this is so amazing. And to me, that was like, this is the most important thing to me.
What was?
Just that you can be with your family forever. When you die, you still get to be with your spouse and your kids.
And they would say what?
And they were like, well, yeah, I already believe that. Like, what's so special about that?
And then you have to go, well, your family is actually not.
Yeah. Well, not to scare you, but when you were baptized, they didn't have the right authority. And
I am here to take that away from you so
Which
that I
is
can give it to you.
Yeah.
insane to think about 19-year-old child coming into your home telling you
Coming
that.
to Georgia.
Yeah.
Little Utah girl going to Georgia.
Yeah.
Sorry, your family isn't eternal.
And they
We
didn't
have a
take me
message of joy
seriously
for
because
you.
I was from Utah. You know, they're like, oh, you're just another Mormon from Utah.
Yeah.
Bless your heart.
Yep. Got told that many
Bless
times.
your heart.
Aren't you cute?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize what that really meant until much later.
You think only your family gets to be in heaven. No, that's
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And I bet you're going to say it was a year and a half of some of the best years of your life and you really grew and it strengthened you. And isn't that always the answer? It's like, it was horrible and one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Absolutely cliche. One of maybe the best decision that I ever made besides marrying Jackson was going on the mission, but also I would never do it again. You couldn't pay me enough money and it was traumatizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like, you get to be away from home. You get to learn a different culture. You get to learn, independence and confidence and communication skills and courage and how to do hard things. Like it's like summer sales, but for 2 years or a year and a half, like how could it not, be helpful to you, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I think there's plenty of ex-Mormons that wish that they could still send their kids on a mission equivalent. So it's just so brilliant, that both the porn masturbation thing and the mission thing really is genius on the part of the Mormon Church in terms of its own self-interest, I mean.
Yeah.
And the benefit of its members, right?
Yeah.
It's weird.
If it doesn't do a ton of undue harm. But yeah.
For sure. I understand there are some people that have really bad experiences on the mission. Those are totally valid. I'm lucky that I didn't have anything
You
like
didn't
that.
tell them about the guy that proposed to you.
Oh yeah, that just to touch on that weird things happen. This is really the weirdest thing that happened to me is we were teaching a man and he was kind of weird and he proposed to me and wanted me to marry him and was like offering me all of these things and checking my sex chakra and weird things like that, which we didn't. You have those missionary
he did Reiki
goggles.
on you? Did he do Reiki?
Yeah, something like that. And just missionary goggles because you're like, oh, it's not that serious. Like he's not that much of a creep, and it's like, yeah, that's pretty creepy.
And what was he, like 50 something?
He was old enough to be. He had a daughter my age.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That reminds me of Heretic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You have some really interesting thoughts. I think
Thank you
it's
for reading
time
my
for
sex
us
chakra.
to go.
Totally. I was, what's her name? Sister Paxton. Yeah.
Well, Jackson, how was your mission?
Same thing. It's going to be the same story. Simultaneously, some of the deepest feelings of self-hatred and shame of my life.
Because you started feeling unworthy to even go, right?
Yeah. By the standards of the Mormon Church, I wasn't worthy to go. Because I was, I had girlfriends that I was, having sexual experiences with, right? They were consensual, mutual, but they, that's obviously not sanctioned. And then,
How could you not? You were a deviant, and I said that, right?
And, pornography and masturbation. I mean, I masturbated the day before I went on my mission, and I mean, the things that does to your psyche is just insane, but.
And you have to lie to your bishop and stake president. Right. So they teach you to lie. They incentivize you to lie. Mm-hmm. Or if you were to be honest, what would have happened?
I would have he probably had my mission delayed. I don't think it was anything serious enough that I wouldn't have been able to go at all. But certainly would have probably had to wait a year, I would think.
And what's that like in Highland?
Well, yeah, all my friends had their mission calls, and all of them were going after we graduated at 18.
So
you don't want to be the guy that stays behind, So, yeah.
So you lie, right?
So you lie. Exactly. That's exactly what you do.
Yeah.
So I lied about it. Again, I kind of made that elder price. I'm going to blow God's freaking mind with my hard work ethic, and maybe that'll be good enough for him, And so, went into the MTC, and for me, it was like, I am not going to masturbate. Like, that is just not going to happen. And so I didn't for 6 months, I think, which was like the most wild white knuckle force of self-will I think I've ever had in my life. But I didn't feel any better. I still felt bad about the things that I had done previously. And so the shame followed me. It didn't matter how hard I worked. It didn't matter, how many people we were baptizing. I went to Honduras, so it was different from Claire's experience in that we had a lot of people to teach, and we were baptizing people. But it didn't matter any outward amount of success that I had on my mission. The shame was still there. So had a bit of a rough patch with my second companion. We didn't really get along, and we weren't having a lot of success just because I think we were fighting all the time. But we, I thought it was all me. I thought I was causing people to not want to accept the gospel because of not repenting from what I had done. So,
I see.
So, went to my mission president, and the pain of the guilt and shame was so great that I thought, I better just go home, because I'm hindering people's salvation, and I'm torturing myself while I'm at it. So went to my mission president, and I thought the things that I had done were enough to get anyone sent home. Like, one of the 100 things that I had done in my mind was enough to get me sent home. So I was like, there's literally no chance I stay out of my mission. I didn't want to go home, but I thought I was going to get sent home. So I talked to him, and kind of the same thing. It was a little bit awkward. And he said, because this stuff happened, a lot of this stuff happened before you left on your mission, I actually need you to call your stake president from home. And so my stake president from home called me, and we talked about it, and he said, I think you're okay to stay out. Kind of a harrowing experience. I thought I had worshipped my dad for his mission stories my whole life. My dad was my hero. And so the idea that I would go out on my mission and then get sent home early was really scary to me, just because I wanted to have that same experience that my dad had.
But you got to stay. You got to stay out.
Yeah, I got to stay out. So what was that?
I was going to say, I don't know if you want to share what your dad had said to you before you left on your mission.
Yeah, and again, just prefacing this, my dad is an amazing person, and it still is my best friend to this day. But he told me before I left on my mission, he said the classic, basically, come home in a body bag or don't come home at all. You're going out to stay, So
well, that adds, that really adds to how scary then it would be for you to go in and think.
Wait, come home in a body bag or don't come home early. Is that what he said, basically?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the only, and it's hyperbole. I know he didn't mean it, know. I would have a home if I came home, that was never in question. But it was very clear to me that when an Adams does something, an Adams doesn't quit, right? You don't quit halfway through. So had I been sent home for something that I had done, not over quitting, I think it would have been a little bit of a different story too. But
my mission president shared the quote, it's better to come home in a pine box
Yep.
than come home early from a mission.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So those are the pressures, the opposing forces working against you when you're a young man on a mission, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a really interesting experience. Honduras was the murder capital of the world when I was there.
Ooh.
The city I was specifically in was the murder capital of the world.
Tegucigalpa?
No, San Pedro Sula.
Oh, okay.
was that palpable?
Definitely, yeah. And I shudder to think of some of the situations that we were in, just completely unaware that we were in danger, really.
Well, you're kind of taught that the Lord will protect you.
Right.
And you're wearing garments, which are protection. So you almost feel invincible sometimes as a Mormon missionary.
And it's survivorship bias, right? Nothing bad ever happens, so obviously I'm protected, and so we, but it was every day we heard gunshots. The gangs are always having territory wars there. And the ward boundaries can't keep up. I think they try to be okay, people over there can't cross this street. But then a couple years go by and those things are constantly shifting, And so we as missionaries had to be extremely street savvy to know what parts of the area that you couldn't just be going back and forth, right? People would get suspicious.
Because of gang territory?
Gang territories.
Oh, okay.
And essentially how they operate is they charge what they call war tax on all the businesses in their area. So they say, we're MS-13, we control this area and we will protect your business, if you pay us 10% of your 15%, whatever it is, of your income. So they're constantly fighting over expanding their territory so they can expand their reach and their tax. But there was one time on P-Day, I was carrying a baseball bat. We were going to go play baseball and we got stopped by gang members. They took the bat from us and said, don't ever walk on the street again.
Wow.
Because they perceived it as a threat or something.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this. So on your mission, that feels like survival.
Sure.
You're in a highly stressful survival kind of. Did you feel that, or did you feel like you were protected and so it wasn't that big a deal? At the time, was your cortisol pumping a good deal of the time, or were you I'm good, I think it's all going to work out?
I think over 2 years, that's 700 some odd days, I have a half dozen to a dozen experiences that made me kind of snap out of it and be oh wow, this is real, and I actually need to be careful.
Okay.
But the majority of the time, you're just kind of walking around and you don't really realize where you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think too, if I can jump in really quick, I don't want to take anything away from you, but maybe you'll touch on this. He's being very modest in the degree of kind of horror that he witnessed. He didn't tell me a lot of things that he saw on his mission until we had been married for a while, and he had PTSD from gunshots every 4th of July for the first couple years of our marriage.
Yeah,
he would
exactly.
kind of freak out a little bit.
And it was weird because I wasn't conscious of why I was freaking out. It was just, I would have this biological response to the sound of fireworks because they sounded like gunshots, and I would have a panic attack. One time we were driving and I had to pull over and she was like, what's going on? And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. And so your body keeps score.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we send our children to these dangerous areas where their kids see dead bodies on the side of the street and he got robbed all the time at knife point, right?
Yeah, not all the time, but yeah.
More than a couple times feels a lot.
Yeah.
No, I think the count, there's 10 or 12 Mormon missionaries just in 2024 that have already died. Missionaries get robbed at gunpoint or knife point or assaulted or killed every year, right? And I think the church, the church doesn't do a good enough job of protecting its missionaries, I think.
Well, San Pedro Sula is on the do not travel list.
Yeah.
Do not travel. Like, why would you even live there? You know, like,
Yeah.
and that's not a disrespect to people that live there. I love the people that live there very deeply. And they're all very good people, but it's irresponsible for sure.
Like maybe not send missionaries to the number one murder.
Yeah. My brother got stuck in Nicaragua when their civil unrest started a few years ago, and it was 2 weeks of no contact. We didn't know where he was. Planes weren't leaving the country, you know.
Yeah.
And we just didn't sleep as a family for 2 weeks.
Wow.
While we waited for our brother to get out, you know.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about your mission?
I think the only other thing I'll say, just going back to how I didn't grow up necessarily like super staunch, you know, these are the rules and there's no other way. So there were like a few weird experiences that kind of got me to that point. With my trainer, I went and bought some sweet tea. Like, me and my dad love sweet tea. And
Which is a sin.
Yep. It's horrible. And
A Mormon sin, I should say.
my companion.
Was it peach tea?
I think so. Yeah.
I think Claire mentioned in her outline that
Something
she was your family was sus
My family's sus.
because there's some peach tea being consumed in your family.
Peach tea is a staple at the Adams household on a Sunday. It's pretty sus.
Unconscionable.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So I went and bought a tea because it was really hot outside. And my companion is like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have said.
Yeah, like what? And I was like, what are you talking about, man? I'm going to drink. And so that, like, I think that's when I started being like, and then you teach the lessons, you know, this was the church that Christ set up, and then the great apostasy happened, and then Joseph Smith restored the one true church. And I think that's when my idea that this had to be the only true church formed, just by teaching that to people. The thing it kind of set up in my mind, though, is I was starting to, where she was starting to see cracks in her testimony of the church, I was starting to see cracks in my testimony of God. And the church was kind of an anchor to me to believe in God. Because if I didn't believe in the church anymore, I wasn't so sure that I could believe in God. And a lot of that kind of started bubbling up on my mission.
This is really important for the church. I mean, I know they watch, and I hope they learn. Like, we know that the youth and the young adults are leaving in droves, and what you both are describing are church-imposed dynamics that are challenging your testimonies at the very time you're supposed to be strengthening them in your youth and on your mission. The church is doing things that are setting you guys up to want to, you know, lose your faith and leave later, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't, on my part, I don't know that there's anything that the church can do about it.
Yeah.
Because they sent me to a country where I was faced with just like really startling levels of poverty and violence. And these were people that had really strong belief in God. And it didn't seem like God ever really wanted to throw them a bone, you know? And that was really hard for me to reconcile.
I can imagine.
And then there's this idea that, well, people suffer so that we can learn to be like Christ. And that, I think, is an arrogant doctrine, because you're saying that someone's suffering is for my benefit, right?
Right.
And that never really clicked for me. And so it just seemed like a lot of meaningless suffering going on down there with people that had a lot of faith in God.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're starting to have questions start to come up around your concept of God.
Yeah.
And how about, can we touch base on this idea that you went into your mission with, of just like, I'm going to, you know, work so hard, I'm just going to be cleansed, it'll be taken from me.
Sure.
No more of the sexual, like no sex drive for me.
Yep.
as you kind of close out your mission,
Did you achieve sexual purity?
No. I think I mentioned, I lasted like 6 months or something like that, and then,
so how did you process that?
it was horrifying. It was the first time I masturbated on my mission. It was, I thought I was going to hell. Right. And, it wasn't something, that I think it could have been so much healthier because I had no access to pornography. And so it could have kind of split up that unhealthy relationship between the two in my mind. But it didn't, right? To me, it was just as bad. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, it was something that I dealt with for the rest of my mission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I worked really hard my whole mission. That I did.
Did you change all of mankind?
I did. Yeah. You might see it in the news later.
It was mostly him too.
Yeah. Mostly
My
me.
best friend.
Yeah. So, but one other, I think, experience, just with the belief in God before I move on from my mission is, my second companion was a Bible basher. I don't know if you had any companions like that, but he really liked proving people wrong with logic, And we got into it one day with a Catholic priest, and I barely spoke Spanish at this point, but he was making some pretty compelling points, in my opinion, about like priesthood lineage and things like that. And the most striking thing, I think, was he believed in his faith just as much as we believed in our faith. And it was really, really hard for us really hard for me to reconcile that, because you could make arguments for Mormonism or for Catholicism, but maybe the answer was we actually don't have any idea and none of us know, right? Or maybe Catholicism's the true church, that was the thought I had at the time. And it kept me up all night. It was probably the first real strong sense of cognitive dissonance that I think I experienced in my life.
All right.
In a second language.
So when you come home from your mission, you're feeling what about yourself and the church and your faith and everything?
I think mostly on fire about it. I think, I thought I'm never going to give this up. This is the most important thing in my life, and it's going to stay that way.
Because you love what you sacrifice for.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's brilliant.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So back to Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do after your mission? Did you go to school before your mission at all?
I did a year.
Where?
Yeah, at Utah State.
Okay. Go Aggies.
Go Aggies.
Go Aggies. So yeah, I went back up to Utah State like a week, 2 weeks after I got home, and on the forefront of my mind was finding an eternal companion, and going to school. And so yeah, I dated a lot, which is funny because I got home in December, we met in March. So I dated a lot.
A good 3 months, too.
A good 3 months,
Yeah.
2.5. But yeah, I was 1000% in, no doubts. Just none of my roommates at the time were active or members. And so I would go to church every Sunday on my own and participate. And yeah, I was loving it.
Okay. Do you remember meeting Jackson for the first time?
Yes, I do. Very clearly. We got set up on a blind date and really just kind of hit it off from there. And
How long had you been home, Jackson?
Almost a year. So I got home in July.
Probably like 9
so
months.
March, 9 months. Yeah.
And what was that like coming back and going to Utah State?
I loved it. It was exactly what I wanted college to be. It was a ton of fun. I think Utah State, for people that are experiencing the spectrum of faith in Mormonism, I think Utah State's a great place to go if you still want to stay in Utah.
Mm-hmm. And so, anything you want to say about dating and your ongoing battle with your sexual purity?
Yeah, this is something that I didn't write a ton about in the outline, but if you want to go on a tangent, we can go on a little bit of a tangent.
Whatever's important in your story.
Sure. Yeah. I think this is something I probably should have written about. So when I got home from my mission, I started dating around a little bit, but pretty quickly started dating this girl that I dated in high school exclusively. And I kind of romanticized the idea of marrying someone that I dated in high school. That's how my parents, met each other. And I don't know, it's just a romantic idea in my mind. We were not compatible really in any sense of the word. She's a great person. That's not to say that she's a bad person. We just weren't compatible, but we kind of tried to make it work. Well, fast forward a few months into our dating, and we end up having sex a couple of times, and I felt horrible about it because I'm a return missionary, and I called my dad, and again, the no tools to deal with these things. He told me, well, you probably need to put a ring on her finger then, were his words. And
because that fixes everything.
It does, yeah. Turns out it doesn't. And
it doesn't.
It doesn't. So we got engaged. I broke it off with her because it was really not good. It just was not a positive relationship. And that was scary, So I think it kind of prepped me to do some other scary things down the road, like leaving the church and things like that. So it ended up being a little bit of a character building experience more than anything. But then it did result in a disciplinary council that was my pleasure to partake in.
Because once you've been through the temple, have the Melchizedek priesthood, served a mission, the church holds you to quote a higher standard.
Exactly.
So since you have sex, what? Your membership becomes threatened.
Exactly. Basically. Yep. So I went to my singles ward bishop at the time and told him what had happened. And essentially it was like, okay, we're done talking about it now. We're going to call a membership council.
Which is putting you on trial.
Yep.
For potential excommunication.
Yep.
It's very medieval.
Yeah.
So stressful.
Which I was like, what is happening? I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
You're like trying to get to college.
Right.
You had just spent 2 years of your life serving the church.
That's right.
And
in the number one
off.
murder capital of.
And they're ready to just up you. Well, maybe you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't believe it, to be frank.
So you felt like this is ridiculous?
Not ridiculous. It felt surreal. It felt like, when someone tells you bad news and just like the world crumbles, like that's how it felt. It just felt like my world fell apart. And, so I was like, okay, here we go again. Right. More confessing. And so I show up on my, council day, and the whole bishopric is there. This was a bishopric one. I don't know if it's always a stake presidency, but it was the bishopric, and one of my peers that was also going to college because he was the ward clerk. So that was weird.
Yeah.
And so they just said basically what happened. So I started telling them things, and then I think is a man, like a confident man, I think I was able to hold my own a little bit.
Did you say in your outline they asked some very graphic questions?
Yeah. Who was the aggressor, for example, which makes no sense. It was
one had to assault the other.
Right.
I mean, right?
Yeah. Like who, I think they were trying to get at who initiated it, but the aggressor, that's weird language in my opinion. No one, it was a consensual experience.
And you were like,
right?
is this a crime? Are we in crime territory? Yeah.
So, just some weird questions. They were graphic about just like the nature of what had happened. You know, I think the most graphic one that I can remember, not safe for work warning, I guess, tag here, but they said, did you ejaculate inside or outside, you know? And I was like, why does that matter? You know, it is beyond, you know, the implications of that, but like, does it matter sin wise, you know, like, well, what, you know, what are you getting at here? Right. So
when you say you felt like you held your own, what do you mean?
Well, I think I was a confident enough person that I could be asked those questions and it not be terribly damaging, I guess, to my mental health. I think about like if a young woman had to go through that experience, or like if Claire had to go through that experience with a bunch of men asking really graphic sexual questions, I think that would be a lot more traumatizing. Not that it wasn't traumatizing for me, but I think it would be more in different circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
So did you get the boot?
I got disfellowshipped, which is kind of the step below excommunication. You're not allowed to pray. You're not allowed to comment in Sunday school. You're not allowed to hold a calling.
Temple recommend taken away?
Yeah, you can't have a temple recommend. You can, I think, depending on who your bishop is, I was still allowed to wear my garments. I don't know that that's always the case.
Allowed to wear
Allowed,
your
yeah.
garments.
What a privilege.
We'll choose your underwear for you.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I spent... up until I was still disfellowshipped when Claire and I met, which is something I had to disclose to her.
That's an awkward conversation.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, when we go to church together next Sunday, I'm not going to take the sacrament.
What was that like, Claire?
To be completely honest, I don't have a lot of recollection. I think
You were in the love zone.
Yeah, well, one, he's just an incredible person. He's so... There's nothing that he hides about himself. Like, what you see is what you get. And I just was so enamored with him as a person. I just loved him so much. I didn't really care, to be honest. Like, I didn't have any concerns about it. I definitely was like a little weird as far as like, okay, like, you'll come around, like, well, we need to go to the temple together, like, kind of in that sense. But I didn't, not that in no regard, like, kept me back in any way. I feel like, am I remembering that correctly?
No, yeah, you were very kind to me. Yeah.
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah.
And I guess in your mind, you had made some mistakes before your mission too.
Mm-hmm.
So in your mind, you weren't perfect either.
Yeah, it was definitely like next level for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wasn't concerned about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was definitely a little weird though, because I was like, we need to go to the temple together. And he's like, I can't go to the temple.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's sort of like, in terms of the power dynamic, they're basically saying, you step out of line, you're finished. And it can either push you away or even pull you closer, I think, to the church.
I think looking back on that time, that was, I think, the most engaged I've, maybe not more than my mission, but I think it's one of the most engaged times I've been with the church. I didn't have any pressure with the callings. And so I felt like I was really able to work on myself in the weird way that I thought about that at the time. But it does. It galvanizes you almost, or it can ruin you. But it galvanized me.
And from your outline, you were assigned to the addiction recovery program. Is that right?
So that was part of it too.
Do you want to? You're laughing. Why are you laughing, Claire?
Well, we spent a lot of time going through that program together.
We're intimately familiar with the program.
Oh, both of you.
We've been through it many times. Well, as a support, because there's support groups for the addict, quote unquote.
Should we explain that whole program? Like, again, like if someone's never been Mormon and they're like, wait, what? You had sex and you like occasionally masturbated, addiction? What? And recovery? Like, that sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous.
It's exactly like Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program retrofitted for Mormonism. That's exactly what it is.
Touch.
For quote, sexual deviance.
Yep.
So this to be clear, was this part of your disfellowship, like that part of your contract or having to get back in?
It was. Yep.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, because as part of it, my mission president at one point had told me, if you're going to confess something, confess it all, because you don't want to leave any cancer cells in there, right?
Oh my God.
And so, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So like if confession is the surgery and it's painful, you might as well get it all out while you're there, right? So I was like, oh, and by the way, I occasionally look at pornography and masturbate. And so I was deemed, because I had a history of it dating back to when I was 14 years old, as an addict to pornography, which was weird to hear. But I guess I just kind of accepted it. And they sent me to the addiction recovery program, which is basically just a group of men that meets once a week in like a seminary building, and they talk about, or church, and they talk about their problems. So,
and who leads these meetings?
Typically someone that's been through the program themselves and quote unquote come out the other side successfully, right? So they'll call missionaries that
Senior
have had,
missionaries.
senior missionaries as leaders of these groups. And typically it's someone that's been through the program themselves. Not always, but typically it is.
Okay. And is it all pornography, masturbation, or are there different addictions?
They have like
that
a
are
general addiction, so they like lump meth and alcohol and heroin all together in one, and then they have a pornography specific one, and that's the one that I went to.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, did it fix you?
No, it actually made it way worse.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I think you talk about the pink elephant thing all the time.
Right.
Ironically, we would discuss that in addiction recovery group. And it's like, well, then what are we doing here? It's when you say don't think of a pink elephant, the first thing you think of is pink elephant. Well, when you're talking about pornography all the time, that's all you think about, right?
So actually, the Mormon Church's addiction and recovery program intended to cure you of your masturbatory sexual deviance made it worse.
Yes.
And that's under quotation.
Yes.
Yes.
Under quotes.
Very
Under
important.
quotes. Yes.
Yeah.
Made it worse. Did y'all hear that, Salt Lake? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are people that I think, there were people that would go that would say that they had stopped. I believe some of them. I really do. I think.
All you know is what they say, but
Right.
what you know is what it did for you.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I also know that I was in there with men, and that this is not to shame people, but there was a guy I heard sharing one week that he couldn't even drive his car without looking at pornography on his phone, right? Like he was that addicted to it, right? I think at that point, addiction probably is the right word.
But the point I want to make, and weirdly, I was at Utah State as a counselor in the counseling center in 2015 while you guys were at USU.
Yeah.
And I had a client who was masturbating so many times in a day that he was injuring himself. And I asked him why, and he said it was because his bishop asked him to text him. So he asked the student to text the bishop every time he masturbated. And again, going back to the pink elephant, he was so freaked out about having to be honest with the scrupulosity and then it was causing him to think about it all the time, all this pressure.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's scrupulosity plus obsession and fixation that leads to this extreme behavior, again, that the church then holds itself out of as the cure when it's the obsession that's causing the hyper behavior.
Yeah. Absolutely. And there were experiences and people that would share things like that. And I just remember thinking, I don't feel like I belong here. This isn't me, but I'm like, the more time I spend with these guys, the closer I get to those types of behaviors, you know? So I told her we quit even before we quit the church, because I just said, this doesn't help me. It makes me feel bad about myself, and the problem doesn't get better, and I don't want to go anymore, you know? So we just stopped going. But yeah, it was an interesting experience. And we would say things like that in group, you know, we were so engrossed in like psychology and learning how to better ourselves, you know, in the best ways that we could. It was like, okay, we can't think about this all the time. So let's think about positive things. Let's try to fill our lives with positive things. And, you know, there were good guys in there, and it wasn't all negative for sure, but it was definitely an interesting experience. Yeah.
So y'all got married and engaged how quickly from the time you met to the time you were?
Met in March, got engaged in June, got married in August.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Very fast.
Yeah.
So
Kind of
that's
fast and
5
furious,
months between meeting and marriage.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty typical.
I would say so. I hear people a little bit longer. My parents, I think it was like 3 weeks after they met, they got engaged, but
Were y'all true Aggies?
not together.
No?
With other people.
Okay. Had to ask as an Aggie. Okay. And was the temple marriage okay for y'all? Not a big deal? Was it exciting? Was it wonderful? Was it scarred by this worthiness stuff? Did y'all have a hard time feeling like you were worthy to get married? You know, any of that?
At that point, I was working so closely with bishops that like they were kind of like, yeah, you can do this. And so I felt okay about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I felt fine too. I think you have the normal like jitters of getting married. Like there's, especially in the temple, there's this huge weight. Like we were talking the other day about when the sealer like pulls you aside into his office or whatever, and he's like giving you his little spiel before you go into the sealing room. Like I remember feeling like a ton of weight of like the decision, and not just the decision of like getting married, but like an eternal marriage. And I remember being a little freaked out by that. And then a little, if I'm being completely honest, actually like totally disenchanted with the sealing ceremony and just like the wedding. It was not what I wanted. Like, I mean, I wanted to get married in the temple and sealed, but it wasn't like this, what I had pictured in my head, this romantic celebration of our love. It was just like, yeah, just what it is like to get married in the temple. It was frankly disappointing.
Yeah.
I feel I had never been to a sealing before that, so I had no clue what was going to happen. And
Kind of ritualistic and a little bit creepy. What? How would you describe it?
The sealer was, you know,
Some dude you didn't know?
He was
We didn't
pretty,
know him.
yeah, we didn't know him. He was
Very old.
And not, I think, totally aware of everything. And like, he stood, if we were sitting here, like on the bench, because they usually talk to you before, he was standing like really close. And so we were like staring at his crotch the entire time he was talking to us, which was weird.
While you're kneeling at the altar?
No, this was
Before
before
the
just
altar.
kind of like before you go up to the altar and he says a few words about marriage. And yeah. So that was interesting. And then he tried to say Dieter F. Uchtdorf, and he said like Peter M. Nuchtdorf. And like, so I'm trying not to laugh because those things are really funny to me. And so, yeah, it was weird. It was definitely weird.
yeah, just a typical temple wedding.
Yeah.
So Claire, I'm surprised, you know, you already explained that you love Jackson so much and, you know, you were enamored with him, you said, but I'm surprised given the church's alarmist language around pornography and premarital sex that you weren't like, man, I'm marrying a guy that's already struggling with the commandments. He's been disfellowshipped and this is going to haunt our marriage, his sexual deviance. And again, all that I say in quotes. I'm just surprised that you weren't alarmed by his behavior before, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's actually a large part of our story. As far as, like I mentioned, the disciplinary thing didn't really faze me, but the pornography thing was really, really heavy. Like the fact that we're like openly talking about this is like a complete 180 from where it started. We were engaged when I found out that Jackson struggled with pornography. And that's when we started going to the groups. That was really traumatizing and harmful to me as a woman, going to the support group with other women who are...
Do the women meet separately from the men?
Yep, the women meet separately.
Sounds like Jody Hildebrandt connections.
I know, that's really
It's
interesting.
not, it was not healthy. Like,
You're all sitting
women-
around talking about your husbands.
Yeah.
And did any of the women ever confess masturbation?
Nope, never.
Okay.
It was always like just kind of bashing on their husbands. And I never did that about Jackson. Like, but it was hard to hear women talk like that about their husbands. And it just puts you in a bad headspace. And it did a lot of damage to us in our relationship. So,
How?
yeah.
Why? How?
Every time, well, then it's like, okay, we need to get software on the computer and you can't use your phone. And then I would get
for what? Software
for like pornography.
Yeah, blocking.
So talk about that. So like you would set it up and you would only have the password and
So I would have to like log him in, and then that became a problem because
So you're
when you're going to
policing.
school, I'm policing him, which isn't a healthy thing.
you're newlyweds.
Yeah. Oh,
He's a
that's
grown ass
so
man.
stressful.
And you're like policing his internet usage.
Yep.
What's that
No,
like?
like, no
really, what's that
wonder.
like?
It's terrible because one, Jackson couldn't like access the internet when he's on campus needing to. I'm in class getting a notification, ding, this is a red website or like whatever is happening. And then we'd get in a fight and I'd have a mental breakdown and then he'd feel, it's like the cycle that we talked about earlier.
Wait, so he would go to a website that he shouldn't quote, and then it would tell you. And Jackson, didn't you know she was getting notified?
Yeah. It's a bad
It's very
spiral.
unhealthy. And I had just I think the thing that frustrates me so badly about this in the church is there's no education. It's so incredibly taboo hearing about pornography, especially as like a girl, as a woman. I didn't really even know what pornography was, or more importantly, like why would a man feel the need to engage with pornography? Like I had no understanding of just any of that, the psychology around it. Like it was just a really unhealthy understanding. It was a rough season for us with that.
Yeah. So like how does that work? You get notified that he's visiting a site that he shouldn't, and then what happens then?
I mean, I think that happened maybe once.
Yeah. Like,
I learned pretty quickly that was a bad idea.
He learned pretty quickly that was a bad idea. And so then from there, then he would come to me, like, because that was kind of like the thing in group, like, okay, you have to be accountable. So you need to tell your spouse, like, if you had a relapse that day, is what they called it, right? A slip up or a relapse. And he would do like, okay with that, but it became less and less that he would tell me because I would have a breakdown every time he told me. And it was just, as you can imagine, just feeding into my insecurities, like that you have. We kind of touched on this about as a woman, especially I feel like, well, just women in general in the world, you have such a high standard of like what you should look like, how you should act. You need to be sexually attractive and desirable. And then put that on top of your experiences with modesty in the church, feeling like your body's not your own. I don't understand my body. I'm not enough for my husband. It's a very layered, unhealthy situation. And then I'm feeding into his shame. And then that hurts our relationship.
Yeah.
So you're feeling like if he goes to porn, he must not find me attractive or my body attractive.
100%.
Yeah. And that makes you feel just inadequate and worse. And, did you ever say, look, we can have sex now. Why would you ever do that if we're able to have sex, right?
I think in less words than that. I tried to communicate that, but like I said, I just didn't have an understanding of
So y'all weren't able to have sort of explicit or candid conversations during this whole time?
I think we had our first healthy conversation about it like a week ago.
Like
we've
from
been in
today?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like we've been in a healthy place about this for, what would you say?
A year or so.
A year or so. And then we had a conversation maybe a week ago, maybe less than that.
Yeah.
was really healthy. It was really eye-opening for me to get some understanding and healing for me. I think healing for both of us. And yeah.
You've been married how long?
Almost 8 years.
Yeah.
7.5 years.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. So how did this cycle affect your ongoing relationship as newlyweds?
I think it was tough. I think we kind of experienced the inverse of what most newlyweds experience. There was really sweet memories from the beginning, for sure. Definitely that honeymoon phase. But we had to go through that together right away. And it was really, really difficult. And it was really hard, I would say, for the first couple years. And then we slowly, over these 7 years, have moved into a healthier place with it.
We both went to therapy. That helped.
Yeah, therapy was a big deal for us. And yeah, I mean, it's an ongoing process, right? A relationship is always something that you're working on, right? But it's been fun, instead of seeing kind of a degradation in our quality of our relationship over time, which I think is the stereotype, it's been the opposite for us. And that's fun.
Yeah. It's making me just feel how you both were just holding such heaviness and honestly trauma going into those early years, like your new budding, your relationship with your own body, your relationship with him, and then you're both carrying, I would imagine, in those groups talking to women, there's a lot of like victimization, feeling very victimized through it. I don't know if that's
for sure.
And how powerless, the powerlessness for you in that situation, and just all that to move into kind of a new, especially in Mormonism, where you don't have a lot of knowledge or about your own body, about each other, about that you're going into it with like a ton of just weight. And trying to what I'm kind of hearing is the further you've gotten away from the conditioning, how you were trained to kind of think about all these things about yourselves, what it means, or is that right? That it's lightened it and now you can actually see each other and yourselves more for who you are, as opposed to like all the layers that you've been wearing for years and years around this thing.
It's incredibly relieving. And it's pretty ironic because that was another kind of crack in my belief in God, was like I would pray and pray and pray, like, please take this away, please take this away. And God never seemed to listen. Nothing ever got better. And then as we deconstructed the church, deconstructed our belief in God, that's when things got really good.
Yeah.
And kind of I got what I prayed for, but
it was the further you got away from,
yeah.
Okay, so should we go on to the childbearing part of your relationship?
Sure. Let's do it.
So I guess, Claire, did you feel like your main purpose in life was to have babies? Is that fair to say? As a
my
Mormon
only
woman?
purpose. Yeah, eternal purpose to have babies.
So y'all, like within 2 years, were having babies or what?
It was 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a little long. It's waiting a little long
Yeah.
by Mormon standards.
Yeah. I was 24 when we had our son, almost 25. So that's, a little bit older than I think a lot of girls have babies in the church.
I think so. I wanted to ask you a question because this came up in the YSA panel that we did, and I was asking about like generationally if there's a difference in messaging to women now, or even your peer group at USU around motherhood, whether there's language around having a job, whether there's language around, if it's different, say, from my generation where really it was having work was never really talked about. Really, the only option was being a stay-at-home mom. If you had an education, it wasn't to use it. It was in case of an emergency, and really quite optional. Not really. How would I ask this? Like, what was your experience, I guess, with the messaging around having an education, being a mom?
Well, I don't know as far as your question goes, like with my peer group at USU, I think it's better than it maybe has been in the past as far as like if you want a career, have a career. But there was definitely like talk of girls, especially like in my program. I studied education, who we were getting a degree in education because it's a good mom job. And we were like, okay, we'll get our degree and then we can have babies and then we can go back to work. And I grew up, luckily my parents really instilled in me the importance of an education and that I should get my degree, but that it felt to me like, okay, this will go on the back burner, like you said, in case of an emergency. And my main purpose will be a mom. And so I had every intention of graduating and not even like working at all, just like get pregnant, have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about how that ended up?
Yeah.
With some surprises
along
the way?
It was the hardest and best thing that's ever happened to me and us. So we had our first child, our son, and it was nothing at all like I was prepared for. I think part of that is, to be fair, it's really hard to explain to someone what it's like to have a newborn who's never had a newborn 24/7. Mm-hmm. Combine that with all of the body and hormone changes that you go through as a mother after birth. And also combined with, I just feel like motherhood is very romanticized in the church. Like nobody really talks about the hard parts of it. And maybe that's because they don't want to scare you. Maybe that's because you're too young. I'm not sure, but I fully wasn't prepared. And for me, distinctly, I can remember I had a really long, hard labor. And the second my son was born, it was like this complete wave went over my body of this feeling of like detachment from my child. And I think there's a proper term for it. Again, it's a hard thing to explain if you haven't experienced it, but I just felt completely detached to my child. I didn't want to hold him, didn't want to be around him. And I developed some postpartum depression, crippling anxiety. It was really hard to get out of bed, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Jackson really took the reins and took on a lot of the burden at that time, taking care of a newborn and me and my mother, who I'm so grateful for, was there for me at that time and was so incredibly helpful. But yeah, that, again, I hadn't really experienced those feelings since my mission of the depression, and then really intense anxiety attacks again. So I was just completely miserable. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. There were definitely moments where I felt joy in my motherhood. And of course I loved our son, but it really started to wear me down. Hours and hours a day, you're rocking a newborn in the dark and dealing with all of these hard emotions kind of brought me into a dark place as far as like starting to question things. And I became very annoyed and disenchanted with the church. And I kind of fell into a space of some interest in just like general Christianity. And I consumed a lot of Christian content like podcasts. And I really liked the emphasis around Christ that other churches seem to have, that I felt like ours was lacking. Like I really didn't enjoy going to sacrament meeting, and it was supposed to be about Jesus because we're taking the sacrament, remembering him. But people would get up and not talk about Jesus. And anyway, it really started to wear on me. My mental health was bad. Health anxiety was incredibly bad. It got so bad to the point where finally Jackson was like, you need to go to therapy. Like, this is hurting our relationship. So I started therapy. It was incredibly helpful to me. I did some EMDR, which was very helpful. And it completely changed my world as far as my health anxiety went. And I did have some conversations with her about like feeling spiritually detached. And she did try to help me with that a little bit. And so one thing she had suggested to me was like getting some more like connection with people around me. And so one day when our son was like a year old, I was rocking him for his nap. And I had the thought, I wonder, like I had heard some people talk about like TikTok, and that's really the most embarrassing part of my story is that TikTok was really my demise.
Wait, your demise? What kind of demise?
Was TikTok, like
your demise of what?
Of my testimony
Oh,
and deconstructing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, like I've heard like TikTok can be fun. Like maybe there's some moms, like, you know, like the mom content that's out there, like moms film themselves and you can relate. It's relatable. So I was like, I'm sitting here for 2 hours with my child, rocking them. I'm going to get on TikTok. And I knew nothing about TikTok at the time. I was like, okay, like there's a search bar. So I just like, my idea was I'll find some moms like in my area and maybe like I can relate to them. And they can relate on the postpartum depression and the anxiety. So I, in the search bar, just typed Utah. I think was all I typed was Utah. And like, I think the first couple of videos were fine. And then I kept like swiping and it was like ex-Mormon content, anti-Mormon content. And I was like, oh, like this is weird, kind of scary.
Swipe really fast.
Yeah, exactly. And then I started, the same lady kept popping up. And Alicia from Faith Unraveled.
Alicia Lee.
Alicia Lee.
Yeah. Her videos kept popping up and I really liked listening to her because she had like such a background with young women in the church and she would tell stories about her motherhood. And I was like, she seems like really nice. Like she's not wearing garments and she's saying some like crazy things about the church. I don't know if those are true. And she said something about the CES letter. And I was like, I had heard of it before, like very briefly when it had come out, I think. But I knew it as like anti-Mormon content. Like you do not read the CES letter.
Right.
And I was so depressed and anxious and I just really didn't care. So I looked it up and I read the entirety of the CES letter during my son's nap. And it was like an out-of-body experience. My entire world just came crashing down. It was like another panic attack, that feeling of like, am I having a heart attack? Am I dying right now? And my first thoughts were, this cannot be true. Like, this is so false. They're making this stuff up. And that sent me down a rabbit hole of truth claims in the church history. I didn't go back to the CES letter for a long time. I looked up like CES letter rebuttals and I read Jim Bennett's. There's some others out there, I think.
Do you remember what bugged you? What were maybe three of the biggest things that bugged you out of the CES letter that you thought were even of concern or credible? Because you could always just read that and go, it's anti-Mormon lies and shut it off. But clearly that's not what happened. Yeah.
The biggest things for me were, even more than the Book of Mormon stuff, was the Book of Abraham and the Kinderhook plates. For some reason in my mind, I was like, okay, if this is true and this stuff is made up and he fabricated this, then that would make the Book of Mormon false.
Because those are two examples of false translations where Joseph actually didn't translate what he said he did. Yeah.
So those two, polygamy stuff, it really is hard to think back at what did I know before and what didn't I? I truly think I really didn't know the majority of the things in there. Like, I don't think that I knew that Joseph Smith had polygamous wives. I certainly didn't know about polygamy and 14-year-old girls and
polyandry.
Polyandry, which is what I meant, which is marrying women who are already married, already have a husband. And that was deeply disturbing to me.
What year was this about?
This was the end of 2022.
So this is 2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, like exactly 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So I spent the next year completely consumed by Mormon history. And it was like my full-time job, that and caring for my son. Every nap he had, I was researching, looking up Joseph Smith papers, like, and let me be clear, like all church material, like church history archive stuff that I was looking at. Went back to like the Jim Bennett thing. It would put a Band-Aid on some of my concerns, but then I would sit and nitpick them. And I was like, okay, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Then I'd go back to the CES letter, and I studied a lot of, primary resources, all the things. Then I ran into Mormon Stories. We talked about this last night. John's voice was just always in my house during the day. When Jackson was at work, Jackson had no idea. I would be listening to it and then hear him come home and turn off Mormon Stories because I didn't want him to know that I was listening.
Mm-hmm. How was that useful to you at the time?
It was a complete lifeline. It was helpful in many ways. One, just feeling like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one that's like bothered by these things, that's noticing these issues. Very informative. It was helpful because like with the LDS discussion series, it's like all of the information in one place and everything is cited, and those citations are church history documents, and it's just really easy place to consume those things. And of course, like I listened, was so helpful to listen to other women's stories my age and feel some relation there, and incredibly, incredibly helpful.
Okay. So it's like your dirty little secret, full-time job.
Absolutely. And I felt so much guilt about it. Like
it's like your equivalent of porn.
Literally, yeah.
It's like church history porn.
Yeah. The fact that I was listening to Mormon Stories, reading the CS letter, just having questions about church things. And like I said, I went back and forth between reading all the faithful points of view and reading the critics. And really, I wanted to form my own opinion. I didn't talk to anybody about it.
What kept you from just the very first day telling Jackson? Explain that to our Never Mormons, why you wouldn't just tell him and then you guys would dig in together.
Yeah.
You know?
I was afraid that he would leave me. I was afraid of being judged. Like that I wasn't strong. It was embarrassing to me, to be honest, because I had been like the golden child, like serve the mission, don't do anything wrong, get married in the temple, have a baby, all the right things. Like that role that I was playing. It was embarrassing that I was, and disappointing to me that like, I must not be that righteous. Like I must not be that elect. And my patriarchal blessing says there will never be a time in my life where I will lose my faith, and I'm losing my faith. So what's wrong with me? Like, am I possessed? Like there's so much shame and so much, like taboo growing up in the church as far as like anti-Mormon things go. And I found that again, ironic, because to me, it wasn't like anti-Mormon. It was just like, this is the history of the church. It's not. Like,
but that was hid from you.
Yeah, exactly. So I really was afraid that he would leave me. And so I didn't tell him for probably 6 months, maybe. I can't remember how long it was.
That's so wild.
And when I did tell him, the conversation was, hey, I'm struggling with my faith and my testimony. I just need you to know that. Literally, that was it. I didn't say anything. I was so afraid of him having a faith crisis that I didn't tell him any of my concerns. He had no clue.
Wow. What was that like for you, Jackson? You had no idea?
I had no idea. Yeah.
Secretly...
It kind of blindsided me. I could tell she was a little bit disengaged at church, but I hate church. So I was like, sweet, this is great.
He's always been very, very nuanced and about like,
I think for me, it was like, okay. And speaking of patriarchal blessings, mine said, I will study the life of Joseph Smith and pray about him. Yeah. Oops.
Hey, patriarchs, take that out.
Maybe you should have said teachings of Joseph Smith, although that's problematic too. But the life and teachings of Joseph Smith, I think is how it says it. And pray until I have an absolute certainty that he's the prophet of God. And so when she came to me, and you did mention, because I said, what's bothering you? And you said polygamy mostly.
because I knew that was a safe topic, because who's not bugged by polygamy?
Yeah.
And
Right.
he already knew that I had issues with that.
He's like, I'll solve that problem.
Yeah.
Literally, yeah. I think I told her something to the effect of, "Don't worry, I've had struggles with my faith
He
before.
literally
We can
said
get
to
through
me,
this."
everyone has to go through this. I've been through it.
Yeah.
It'll be fine.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't think you know what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
I mean, can we just take a moment, though, to honor the fact that you were taking care of a young human being on your own, which is incredibly immersive. Let's just say that experience alone is it's an immersive, oftentimes isolating
With postpartum depression.
experience with complications, right? And you're also deconstructing this whole alone.
Yeah. And then I got pregnant
A second time.
a second time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have one of those things, but to have both, and then to be alone, like you're not telling anyone, that's a lot to hold for a human being. Yeah. Did it feel like a lot?
Yeah. It was a lot. It was so much that there were some people in my life, like a couple friends, like my sister, who I had just briefly said, like, oh, I'm kind of like struggling a little bit, like not quite feeling it. And I remember specifically having a conversation with my sister saying, but I'll never leave the church, because that was really before I had completely like gone down the rabbit hole and deconstructed. So I ate my words, but that's all I ever said. Oh, I'm just struggling a little bit. No specifics. Nobody knew the extent. We blindsided everybody in our life when we came out to people about it. But yeah, it was extremely heavy.
So you told Jackson just very minimal. Jackson's like, I'll solve the polygamy problem.
So then you're off and running.
So I'm off and running at that point.
And then how'd that pursue for you?
Well, I think this is why I said at the beginning that Claire is the hero of the story, because of what you just said, Margie, what she went through, the level of honesty and integrity that it takes. Sorry. I'm blown away, and that was really hard for her. And I was
explain why that blows you away, just for the never Mormons that don't understand.
The church is everything. It is the very fabric of your life. It's the meaning of your life. It's the meaning of the universe. The courage that gosh, I'm sorry.
Really sweet.
The courage that it took for her to look at this stuff and be honest about it and come to me and talk to me about it. And yeah, sorry. I'll always respect her for it. That's for sure. It's scary, It's scary to look into it, and to have that level of crisis of faith while she's going through all these other things was just monumental. It just took a monumental feat of strength, and it was just cool to witness. Cool to be standing by her side when it happened.
Except, wouldn't that be terrifying for you if that was the reason you got married, if that was the contract you were married under, if you had been fighting with worthiness this whole time, and now all of a sudden your eternal companion is telling you she's doubting the thing that had defined your life up until that point?
You have to remember, John, at this point, I'm the patriarch, so I'm going to lead us to safety.
So you got your utility belt on.
He's like,
That's right.
not to worry.
Not to worry.
Here I come to save the day.
This will be our Ensign story. Yeah, so I didn't, and she's been obvious through this podcast. She's been through a lot with me too. So it does make me sad that she would think that something like that would make me leave her, because it wouldn't.
Well, it would for so many.
Right.
You think too, like your eternal marriage is like what is keeping you together. Like, even though we like connect in so many other ways, I think at the time specifically, because we were struggling with so many things that felt like if I let this go, I might be letting go of my relationship with you.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stand that dissonance anymore in my life, and it became like more important to me to like live in truth than to live a lie. I couldn't do it. And if that meant losing everything, I had to do it. Like it's just such an important, in the church too, they talk about how important integrity is. And I felt like I wouldn't have integrity if I just continued to pretend like I believed something that I didn't believe.
Yeah. And I think we share that. The truth is important to us. Yeah. And so as soon as I started looking into it, it wasn't long before I saw that she was kind of onto something. And so that just increased the empathy and the understanding. And
so you weren't able to fix the...
He didn't tell me either.
I tried.
By the way.
Okay.
So do you want
He
to
was
talk about
going on
that?
his journey.
Yeah, so you had your own.
Yeah, I think I wanted to go away, shore up my testimony, come back and help her come back. And so that's what I tried to do. And it almost immediately fell apart on me, just because there's so many issues. And as soon as you start looking into it, it gets harder and harder and harder to justify.
What were your top three?
For me, the Book of Abraham, and because it actually in Deacon's Quorum way back, I remember asking, "This is amazing. If this is a correct translation, this is like the greatest proof that Mormonism is true." And my leader said, "Well, don't look into that too much." And so that was like big because it was kind of a decades long piece of item on the shelf, right? So that was big for me. I think the anachronisms in the Book of Mormon were pretty damning.
Like horses and steel.
Horses and steel. And I'm a big history nerd. I read things about history, like I really like American history and ancient American history. And it's really obvious once you actually look at it that it's an 18th or 19th century piece of fiction.
The Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon. Yeah. Yep. So that was a big deal. And then for me, the SEC scandal was a huge deal.
Tell us what that is?
So essentially the church got fined $5 million for concealing how much wealth they have. And the way that they did that is they set up 12 or 13 different shell companies. And there's a myriad of reasons to do that. One, you don't want people to know how much money you have. Two, there are tax evasion strategies and things that they can employ. So it was, for me, that had no business in being in the true Church of Christ. That, in my opinion, was just unacceptable.
Church that preaches to be honest.
Yeah. I think I could have gotten over that had Joseph Smith been who he said he was and the Book of Mormon what it claimed to be. I think I could have gotten over everything else. But that on top of current day problems made me not even want to be a cultural Mormon.
Can I just note that hearing your stories up to this point, the church had put you both through so much in terms of perfectionism and worthiness and standards and even punishment and, addiction recovery programs and modesty shaming.
It's like
and
personal torment.
And then you find out they've been hiding and lying systemically in major ways and defrauding you, and that Joseph Smith was in effect a charlatan. And what's it like to be tormented with such high standards and then find out the church is acting so systemically deceitful from its start to the current day. What's that like? I mean, that's got to exacerbate it, right? If you've been tormented for so long to find that out. I don't mean to inject that in your story, but.
No, first you get really sad about it because you have all this sunk cost into it, right? You've put so much into this. And then you quickly move to anger, and you stay there for a while. Mm-hmm. And then you go back, and then you come out of it, and then you go back. And you
want to talk about what makes the anger materialize? Maybe both of you.
You can go first.
For me, it's the fact that I was lied to, and that I gave so much to it, like you said. That makes me mad. But then when I get really upset is now I can see how I was being lied to. And there are a lot of people in my life that are experiencing the exact same kinds of damages that I've been talking about today. They're still experiencing it. And that makes me mad.
Okay.
Yeah, very similar. I think it's just such an incredibly earth-shattering experience. Your entire worldview disappears, and there's so much pain and betrayal that you feel, like this thing that I gave everything to has betrayed me, and it's something that people give absolutely everything to. Their time, their money, their heart, their belief. They say that they know these things. It's just, felt complete betrayal to me and disbelief that everything that I had ever thought was real was make-believe.
And Claire, what's it like for you if, like, on your mission, you're like curled up in a ball on the bathroom floor having panic attacks, and then having a baby and feeling detachment and severe depression and PTSD, and then you find out the source of all that, the driving source or force for those things you suffered is a church that now you find out isn't what it claimed to be. What's that like?
It's hurtful. Really hurtful, but also relieving, because finally it was like, I'm not insane. Like, I'm not the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not the problem. That's so powerful. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm enough. Like, who I am. Like, I don't need, it's like blasphemous to some people to hear this, but having deconstructed the way that we did, like, I'm enough without Jesus. I'm enough without God. I'm enough just existing the way that I exist. And that's beautiful. And it's given me more confidence and love for myself, more awe in myself and humanity and the world in general than I've ever felt. More clarity. I mean, literally everything is better in my life because of that.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been cool to see her, like, some things that she struggled with mentally. It's insane to watch something disappear overnight, like it has with her, and not come back. You know, it's a miracle.
Really.
Yeah.
And it really was overnight.
Yeah.
So where did that leave you guys in your marriage and in your life?
I was going through a tough time, just in general. Like I said earlier, I think the church was the last thing that was holding the vestiges of my belief in God with it. And so as I stood on this precipice, looking over the edge, I sensed that there was no bottom to the abyss. And in a way, I was, I think, right about that. And so I went into a really, really, really dark place for about
6 months.
6 months. And she would be like, "What is going on with you? Like, can you please talk to me?" And I just couldn't even find words to describe what I was going through, because it was so shocking to me. Like going into the depths of nihilism is the best way to describe it, you know, because I didn't believe all of a sudden that there was any meaning to anything.
Yeah.
And again, he was not communicating this to me at all. And so we were incredibly detached. I was pregnant with our second child, feeling like I'm losing my marriage because I've ruined this because I confided in him. And yeah, it was not a good time.
Are you familiar with the interview we did with Britt Hartley? And do you know Britt Hartley's
That's
work?
kind of when I started to climb out of it a little bit. I say climb out. I think Britt says this, you never really leave it behind, right? But you start to reframe it and you start to play in the space that you have and create local meaning.
Right.
But that sense of meaning, that there's order to the universe that I can understand, and that is built around me, and I'm going to be a part of said universe and creating said universe someday, it's all gone, right?
Right.
But yeah, I think it was a 2-part series with Britt. I was like, okay, like she's been saying, I'm not crazy, you know?
That's right.
And there are other people that think this way. And we saw her at Thrive, actually, in American Fork a couple weeks ago or a month ago or whenever that was. And I probably freaked her out. I said, Britt, can I please give you a hug? You know, it's like, who's this stranger, you know? But her book and her content has meant the world to me, you know, specifically.
Yeah.
Her podcast, because before this, Jackson had finally come to me and said, the reason I've been depressed for 6 months is because, one, I don't believe in the church, but more importantly, I don't even know that I can believe in God anymore. And at that point, I was totally there with the church thing, but not there with the God thing. And Britt's podcast really helped me kind of go through my deconstruction of that as well.
Okay. So how did you experience Jackson during this 6 months where he's basically in this state of nihilism, questioning, actually, is there meaning at all in living, right? How did you experience him during that time? What did it look like? What did it feel like for you?
He really just drew inwards, was very detached. Typically we'll have like very deep philosophical conversations with each other. That wasn't happening. Anytime that I would try, like, are you okay? Do you need to talk about something? He would shoot it down. He would just keep saying, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. And so then I'm wondering, oh boy, like, what are you going to tell me?
What's coming?
Yeah. Yeah. Very detached. And
how vulnerable are you at this point with 1.5 kids?
Yeah.
And hadn't really established a career. And
yeah.
And also, what
incredibly
does this
vulnerable.
deconstruction mean for us? Yeah.
It was,
I felt bad because I really did want to connect with her, but I like almost physically couldn't do it. I was so like in this void. It wasn't a lack of wanting. It was just a complete inability to understand how to even begin.
Right, right. So I asked Britt this in her podcast. So for you going through it, that 6 months, what did that look like? Were you still going to work every day? Are you going through the motions, but just sort of not home, right? Not actually, like, how would you describe your state during that time? Is it dreamlike? Is it dissociated? Is it?
It's mostly dissociation. I didn't have a hard time keeping up with my responsibilities externally. I think I could still go to work. You know, I was somewhat taking care of my body, but just like kind of on autopilot a little bit. It would bubble to the surface though. Like I'm in sales. And so like we'd be at the end of the quarter and my boss would say, is that deal going to come in before the end of the quarter? And I would say things like, what is the end of the quarter? What does that mean? That's completely made up. We make these things up, you know? And then
What
my
is
boss
time?
would be like,
What is time?
Exactly, yeah.
What is
And
reality?
my boss would be like, dude, what the hell? Like, I need you to snap out of this, you know? Like, it was really
Yes.
hard for me to like care about things, you know? So like I went through the motions and I actually was performing fine at my job, but I didn't care at all.
Yeah.
Like nothing meant anything to me.
Yes.
And it was
It's hard.
it's
is
hard because you go through these phases like my life is meaningless. Okay, I'm going to make sure that my kid's life have meaning. Oh shit, my kid's life has no meaning.
Right.
And their kid's life has no meaning. And you just keep going. And again, like I said, there's just no bottom to the abyss, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to like grasp onto something. And then when you do grasp onto something, you're like, this is meaningless. It's a construct, you know, like I don't have any way to even know what this even means, you know? And so you get in just this really weird, twisted knot. And then like, she'll come to me and like try to break through the dreamlike state, you know? And I don't even know how to explain to her where I am. I don't even understand it myself, you know?
Yeah.
So it's scary, and it never got to the point where I thought of like ending my life. I felt like what John said, I had a family that's in a pretty vulnerable position, and that would be pretty selfish of me. But I understood why people get to that point on a lot deeper of a level, I think, than I ever thought I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how'd y'all climb out? Or did you?
Do you want to try to tackle that?
I feel like we have climbed, or continuing to climb. I think once you kind of get to nihilism, it's something you have to continue to work with for the rest of your existence. But it's been really beautiful and rewarding for us.
Paint a picture of that, because I can see a believing Mormon go, wait, you traded down. Like you
Yeah,
had
for
certainty,
sure.
you had confidence, you had eternity, you had belief and faith and hope, and now you got nothing. Like, no thanks. How could something beautiful come out of that?
One, they might be a little bit right about that, you know, it might be a trade down. I'm still not even 100% sure about that, but kidding aside, I think for us, learning how other people have been through it, people like Britt, right? People with a lot better minds than mine that was literally breaking at this. I think we've tried to latch onto a sense of awe in our lives. Like we really like the idea that whatever the universe came from, we are little bits of universe glued together that can then observe what is happening. And that's like really weird, but really cool. And then you start to see everything in your life is like this really insane chance that we're lucid for just a short span of time, cosmically speaking. So Claire and I met each other on a blind date at Utah State. You know, we could have gone to different colleges. You know, there's so many things that could have happened that we're not, that make it so we're not together, but we are together with this insane amount of circumstantial happenings. And we don't have to be together, but we choose to be together, and it's amazing. And so we try to draw like inspiration and awe from things like that. And we want to raise our children in an environment where they can ask questions and not feel bad about themselves and explore, you know. And I don't know what this life is, you know. I wish I could tell everyone listening to this what life is and what meaning is. I don't have the answer to that, but for us, life is a beautiful thing that we get to observe. So that's kind of how we try to crawl out of it when we get in that dark place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, letting go of all of these things causing me pain has been so incredibly healing, and it's really crazy because you'd think somebody with my personality and my disposition would like be complete like SOS right now. Like I don't believe in God.
Unglued, right?
Like I should be having anxiety attacks every second of every day. But they literally, I spent over 2 decades of my life with my nighttime ritual of pain and anxiety, and letting go of all of this. I climb into bed at night and I roll over and I go to sleep. And it's been the most relieving feeling for me in my life to just be at peace and at rest and to be okay with not knowing and to let go of control. And it's been so incredibly freeing for me. And
so it was the theology that was stressing you out?
I think a lot of the theology was, the perfectionism,
the fear of the, afterlife and not making it. And
like with the polygamy thing, like, and a lot of stress with our marriage, like, okay, if I die and Jackson gets remarried and he gets sealed to this lady, then I'm going to have a sister wife in heaven. And I don't like that. Like, I would rather say, okay, I'll back out. You can have her. I'll be an angel by myself, or like that caused me a lot of pain. And I think it does a lot of people, whether they really like to admit it or not. And I think they placate it by saying like, oh, God will never have you be unhappy. He'll never want you to be uncomfortable. Things will get worked out. And it just doesn't make sense. And now I can just be at peace knowing like, I want to be with you until the day that I die. And from there, whatever happens, happens. And it's hard to describe. There's just a lot of relief for me. I don't feel the need to control everything in my life, this need to control the future, this need to beg God to change his mind about something, even though he's all knowing and he's already made up his mind.
And you ended up with the glasses anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's the whole to the story. Circle back.
As I think about what I learned about mental health, like acceptance and release and detachment, not detachment like not caring, but just like letting go of the illusion of control, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or whatever, that's a big part of positive mental health and wellness, because the illusion of control, trying to chase everything out of your control to try and lock it down, really does drive you crazy.
It does.
But then just saying, you know what, I can't control it all. And then just saying, I'll just live in the moment and live each day, enjoy what I can from each day. And the future, we'll see. That can be a huge relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about awe too. And I've said this before on the podcast, but I do think, when you live with a lens, and we'll say Mormonism as like a lens that you see the world, you see yourself, you see reality through, and there's certainty, it's like the world dies a little. You're like, I know everything and I get everything. And so everything's stagnant. And what's the use of really engaging with it, Yeah. But when you take the lens of like, I know everything, and here are all the things I know, and here are all the things I have to do, and you just kind of take it away, and then it's literally like the world is new.
Yeah.
And awe does come into the picture because you don't know. You're honestly like, well, who knows? And how about that tree over it? Like all of a sudden the world is alive again. And, there's mystery and awe and all those things. And I think awe has one of those, I think, things that when you experience it makes you actually more present, which is like the opposite of Mormonism. I think Mormonism is like,
you're trying to think in the future all the time.
Yes, right? And that's what I'm hearing from both of you, I think in some way, is just much more, in a being place, as opposed to this incessant doing and overthinking and all the things. Would you say that's so?
Absolutely. I think we're definitely both more present. Certainly I am. yeah, like you said, the world is new. It's like you're seeing things for the first time, and I can find joy and awe in things that before I would have just been like, eh.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I've always found awe in music, but I've never really been much of an art person. And suddenly I'm like, art is incredible. I love looking at art and thinking like, this is how I perceive it. What was their intention? And everyone can view things differently. And and also something we've been working on, and Britt talks a lot about this, is like creating those spiritual like experiences for yourself, or those feelings of awe. You can still connect with yourself in that way. And I've had some really cool experiences with that. Like, for example, I was doing yoga with my cousins out in nature, and I just feeling my body in the grass was incredibly breathtaking to me. It made me emotional. And it wasn't breathtaking because it was like, oh, this is the Spirit giving me a spiritual confirmation that God created this earth. It was like this, like, I am a human being, a part of this earth, and I feel one with the earth. And it was incredibly moving for me. And I've continued to have experiences like that where I just get to be and just experience being a human and not have to attribute or assign my feelings to a higher power.
It is super fun to learn about things and not have to try to cram them into my teeny tiny worldview.
Yeah.
I find a lot of joy in that. And, similarly, a couple weeks ago, I came across Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot. What would you call it? Speech? Monologue, maybe? I don't know. But it's about a photo that was taken from a spacecraft many thousands of miles away from the Earth, and the Earth looks like this, tiny. And he's talking about how everything we've ever known, every person we've ever known, lives on that pale blue dot. And listening to him talk about it, the best way to describe it is it's a spiritual experience, connecting with reality like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a beauty of connectedness to life that doesn't require supernatural dogma necessarily, or corporate religiously imposed theology.
Like quarters.
Wait, what do you mean?
Corporate theology. Sorry, that's where my mind went.
Wait, what's quarters?
The quarter. Never mind.
No, I want to hear.
Quarters in a year,
what are you
like
saying
first quarter,
within a
second
story?
quarter.
Yeah,
Oh,
with my
right,
boss.
right,
Yeah,
right,
what is
yes.
a quarter? Yeah.
Got it, yeah, like
That's
financial.
where my mind went with
fiscal
corporate theology.
quarters,
Yeah. Fiscal quarters. That's what I should have said.
No. So, okay. And again, y'all are still in Utah County, right? And my guess is your family and friends all still remain believers for the most part. So do you want to talk about whether you've come out to them, whether it's been awkward, whether they're going to be potentially troubled or disturbed by this episode, any of that?
Yeah, we've I come out to everybody in our life about it. Like I mentioned earlier, it was I think a complete blindside to everyone in our life. And everyone has been very kind and loving. There've been maybe a few comments that have been hurtful. But for the most part, everyone's been very gracious and good about respecting boundaries. We're incredibly blessed with the friends and the family that we have in our life. There will definitely be family members and some friends who will be uncomfortable that we're doing this and will hear things that they don't agree with. But like we expressed at the beginning, it's not our intention at all to hurt anyone. Has nothing to do with anyone personally. We love everyone in our life, and we're incredibly grateful for them and their love.
I think at first when we told everyone, we deeply wanted everyone to look into it with us, and we could all leave, together in a mass exodus style, right? And we quickly learned that wasn't going to be the case, right? So I wrote.
It's so natural. You're just like, hey, you respect us. We're smart.
Yep.
You didn't know. We found some stuff. Surely you'll want to learn. And then when you do, you'll connect the dots and you'll see it just like us. I mean, it's the most natural chain of logic, and it pretty much almost never works out that way. Right?
Well, I think about my friend, one of my best friends from high school. He left the church and simultaneously came out as gay about 6 years ago, 7 maybe. You know, I'm sure he went through the same thing. He's like, oh, I'm going to tell my friends this and they're going to understand and they're going to support me, you know? And unfortunately that wasn't the case. Right. So, yeah, it just doesn't work that way. And so
the lock is pretty tough.
And
it's
it gets
intense.
tighter and tougher usually after people close to you come out and say, we don't believe this anymore. You tighten up and lock up
100%.
tighter.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter, my version of the CES letter, and wanted my whole family to read it, you know, and all my friends, and no one did, you know. And
those letters almost never get read.
They don't work. Yeah, they just don't work.
I try to warn people. They just don't listen.
But maybe the letter was for you. I mean, sometimes writing the letter, it can be also.
Yeah, it is. It was super therapeutic. But I think kind of my biggest healing experience in this area was we went on a family vacation together to the Oregon coast, and my brother, the one that younger than me, we're very, 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 very close, and he's my best friend in the whole world, and this has been really painful for him, and for that I'm sorry, you know. But we were out and we were walking on the beach at night and it was dark, and he turned to me out of the blue. We weren't even talking about this. And he said, Jack, I don't understand what you're going through right now, but I just want you to know that I know your heart, and I know that this is an authentic journey that you're going on. And all my anger at him for not wanting to look at the truth melted away. And I just realized that you don't need people in your life that think the same thing as you do. You just need people in your life that care about you, you know? And so I don't think he knew how meaningful that was to me.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, and so we try, you know, to just be respectful, and we're here when people are ready to talk about it, because they will be, you know, not all of them and not all at once, but they aren't going to want to talk to us if we're taking pot shots at their belief all the time and making fun of their beliefs all the time. So.
Amen to that. Claire?
Yeah, I agree with everything he said.
So any final thoughts or messages or learnings that you guys want to share as we're kind of nearing the end? Anything you wanted to make sure and say?
Did you have anything?
To clarify, how long ago, like how recent is this? You're kind
being
of
like public about it?
You're
a little over a year ago now.
So it's been about, okay.
It's been like 13 or 14 months.
So you've been able, so maybe we'll just take a minute and we'll do maybe rebuilding a little.
Sure.
Did y'all consider staying? I want to come right to you, Margie. Did y'all consider staying in the church as non-believers? Just
yes.
We call it PMOs, physically and mentally out.
Yeah.
And then right to you, Margie.
I think the biggest thing keeping us from being PMOs is we appreciate all the cultural things about the church, getting together around Christmas time, doing things for each other. And so, yeah, you go through that phase where it's like, I kind of still want to hang out with these people, you know? It's really hard to connect when you don't share the dogma of the doctrine. But then two, I think the biggest reason is we didn't want to confuse our kids, go to church and then come home and try to say, hey, you were taught this today. Here's the other side of that, and just like constantly be trying to deprogram. You've talked about that before, John. And so I think it was mostly just a demonstration of love to our kids that we would kind of fall on this sword for them a little bit and take the heat for it. And let them grow up in an environment where they get to believe what they want to believe, not just what mom and dad tell them they should believe.
Or what the community social pressure
Exactly
sort of puts on them, right?
Yep. Anything to add to that?
No, you said that perfectly.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe I'll frame rebuilding like this. What are a few things that have been healing for you? It can be individually or together, that you've let go of. So things that you feel like have been healing for you. It can be conditioning, beliefs, roles, identities that you have let go of recently since, your shift, that have been healing for you.
I think for me, I'm still working on the identity part. Still trying to figure out who I am outside of Mormonism and my belief that I used to have of like my purpose as a woman. But letting go of the conditioning of like that my body is a cause for sin or bad thoughts has been incredibly healing for me. Being able to wear what I want to wear, to just love my body how it is and appreciate my body has been incredibly helpful and freeing. Letting go of a lot of judgment that I feel is instilled in the church, even though I don't think anybody really wants to or tries to be judgmental. I feel that it's something that naturally comes with the culture, and it's been really nice to be able to look at people and not have the first thought be, oh, are they Mormon? Are they wearing garments? Do they have tattoos? Do they have piercings? Like to just look at a human being and appreciate them for who they are authentically and how they're expressing themselves has been really enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, the idea that I can still be masculine and show emotion, which has obviously come out during this.
Love it.
But I've probably cried more these past 2 years than the rest of my other 27 years before this combined. And
wow. That sounds healthy.
Yeah, it's just been really. I don't know. I don't have to pack it down anymore. And it's been that's been really healing for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How about, let's go the opposite direction. Things maybe that you've added to your life that have been healing, enriching. Britt is a perfect example, right, of that in her book. Or it can be resources, it can be practices, it can be whatever you like. Something.
And just so we're clear, the book is No Nonsense Spirituality by Britt Hartley. Yeah. She also has a TikTok channel. Shout out to her. We're going to have her back on, but buy her book. It's amazing. Go ahead, Marty.
It is amazing. So things that you've added, tried, practices, whatever, that you feel like have been healing, enriching, valuable in the healing process in the last bit.
For me, it's been, I think, we can both relate on this, is like taking care of myself for me, and like my physical self. Like I've really enjoyed the past year or so getting more into working out, getting really interested in like, how do I strengthen my body? I want a strong body, and eating well, and just enjoying like being healthy, to live like the highest quality life that I can. I've really enjoyed learning more about science, like evolution and the solar system and how things work. That's been really enjoyable for me. And philosophy's become really interesting. And
learning, huh?
yeah, just learning. And without having to cram it into a specific worldview and pick and choose things like, oh, this kind of works with the worldview. But to just be able to look at it for what it is has been really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that we've started doing recently is the Uplift Kids lessons.
That is John Ogden.
John Ogden, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a really cool program. It's secular, where you can just teach and learn about different values and morals and belief systems and things like that. So we started doing that with our 4-year-old. The 1-year-old will pick it up too, and she's a little bit older. But before we start, we put a candle in the middle of the table, and we let our 4-year-old help us light the candle. And that's like kind of a symbol of we're going to learn something. And so just trying to tap into that sense of like tradition and ritual and, give him that, if we're going to take away, all the ritual and tradition in his community, we feel like we owe that to him to instill some other things,
Right.
I think the other thing is that we always get stuck on wanting like for like experiences. I served a mission and it was amazing. I want my son to go out on a humanitarian trip, and it's like a like for like
That's
experience. Right. And it just isn't possible. Our kids are going to have their own upbringing that is going to be an amalgamation of good and bad as well. And just giving them experiences and opportunities to develop into the human beings that they want to be.
Yeah.
It's not going to look like our journey,
Right.
So letting go of that's kind of going back to the letting go thing again, but that's been helpful.
Yeah, but it can show up as an ad because it can be like a practice. You notice it comes up, you have these expectations, or maybe you have, and then you remind yourself of, yeah. Okay, how about this? Is there something that you feel proud of in this process of kind of becoming of yourself? It can also be of each other. But at least minimally do yourself. Don't just do each other, if that's okay. Just something that you celebrate.
I think for me, I've celebrated just feeling like more powerful than I ever gave myself credit for, like standing up for myself,
Yes.
not letting someone or something define me. And just being authentic and like standing up for truth, which is what I was taught. And I'm really proud of myself for doing something really hard. And I'm proud of Jackson for handling it so incredibly well. He was so gracious to me. He never once made me feel bad at all. He never made me feel stupid or unworthy. And it's been really beautiful and rewarding to watch him be more his authentic self. When he was trying to fit his personality into the guidelines of the church, it really stifled him and dulled his light. And so it's been a joy to just see him shining bright in all of his authentic parts.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
And y'all feel like it's brought your marriage closer together?
Oh yeah.
Weirdly?
Yeah. Way better.
Yeah.
We didn't have a bad marriage. It was a good marriage, but it's...
How can that be? Like we're taught wickedness never was happiness, and we're taught that leaving the church is literally the most wicked thing you can do. How could that, quote, wickedness bring you closer?
I think the biggest thing for us is being together is now a choice, not an obligation. Before, it's like we're sealed. Oh wow, there are kids in the mix. Yikes, we gotta make this work, and it's a little bit more forced.
Right.
when we came out on the other side, I think both of us had that question, like, are we going to stay together? Like, should we be together? Right. And we both like kind of wanted to like talk about it, but didn't know how to like bring it up.
Yeah.
But that's the conclusion that we came to, that right now we choose to be together, and it's just a much healthier place to be.
Yeah. And I think that makes sense that came up, because in many ways, if there is an antithesis to where we've been, it is choice.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so, yes, you were married, and let's just say with the language, with conditioned selves, you made the choice to be married. Mm-hmm. But many times it is important to go back to things where you can. It's not always possible. And give yourselves the choice with the present selves that you are.
Yeah.
Right? And so that makes a lot of sense to me, that we recognize that we have choice. Yeah. Now I want to go back to you. You don't get to escape the question of something that maybe you feel proud of, and also maybe if there's anything that stands out about Claire too.
Sure. Yeah. I think for myself, I'm proud that I was willing to look at this. There were many times, especially early on in the deconstruction process, where you just kind of want to turn back and forget that it ever happened. You take the blue pill or the red pill. I can't remember which one makes you forget everything. I think it's the blue pill, but yeah, blue pill. Got a nod from John. So there were times where I wanted to take the blue pill, but I'm proud of myself for valuing my authenticity and my integrity and my honesty, to be here today, even though it was hard. Mm-hmm. And then for Claire, yeah, I mean, I feel like I've expressed it, mm-hmm. but just so proud to call her my wife. It's really been an incredible thing to watch, knowing her as well as I do, that she was willing to go through the same thing and look at these things. And it was, it was inspiring to me. And so I'm proud of her for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Well, we consider it, no one, unless you're in a high demand religion like Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, ultra-Orthodox Judaism, Islam, like certain, no one's going to understand how courageous it is just to tell your story authentically. So mm-hmm. we get it. So we want to just tell you both how lovely it has been to get to know you, and also how courageous it is, and how grateful we are that you would be vulnerable, but also willing to share your story, generous to share your story.
Yeah.
Likewise, we appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mm.
And y'all been thinking about a podcast. Do you want to even talk about that yet, or is it too early?
It's pretty early, but we're thinking about talking to some people that have more to say on that reconstruction side of things, kind of how we ended this podcast. So our emails will be part of this in the notes or whatever. And, if you're interested in maybe being an interviewee on something like that, we'd love to talk
So y'all
to you.
might start a podcast around reconstruction?
Correct.
You're thinking about that?
Yep.
Okay.
Considering.
And not just for Mormons, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I think we'd find a lot of value in talking to really anyone that has been through something similar, any sort of deconstruction process.
Well, the more the merrier. That's what we think, right, Margie?
Maybe.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Although it's a big decision, so anyway.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Yeah, we appreciate
Do you all
you
want to
bringing
share your emails, or do you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to say them just for those who are viewing, listening now?
Yeah, mine's Jackson. That's spelled with a CK. .m as in man. .adams @gmail.com.
And who do you want to reach out? Just anyone?
Anyone that would be interested in talking about the reconstruction phase of, post deconstruction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you want to give your email?
No pressure. You don't.
No.
Jackson will share with
That's,
us.
Okay,
I think,
perfect.
yeah.
Perfect. Okay. All right.
That's great. We honor you both. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us.
Thank you both
Thank you
too.
for having us.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today on Mormon Stories. Margie, thanks for being co-host.
Yes, my pleasure. As always.
Huge thanks to Julia and Maven and Gerardo and Brooklyn and all our staff, our board. We've had a great year in 2024. We've got great things for 2025. We couldn't do this without our donors. So thanks so much to everyone who donates. The bulk of our donations and our revenue comes from just people going to mormonstories.org, signing up and becoming a monthly donor. And thank you, because we couldn't do it without you. If you do value this content and you're not a donor and you want to become a supporter, that's all you got to do. Go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button, become a monthly donor, and we'll be able to keep doing this. You can also support us by subscribing to these channels, TikTok, Instagram. TikTok for now. We don't know if in a month TikTok will still be there, but Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, subscribing, liking these episodes, sharing with others. We love your feedback, either in the comment section of whatever platform you're on or emailing us at mormonstories@gmail.com. And then finally, we renovated our application system to become a guest on Mormon Stories. Y'all filled out your application. That's how we learned about you, did a little video together. And so if you want to be a guest on Mormon Stories, the way to do that is to go to mormonstories.org, click on the application, fill it out, make us a video, send it to us. We can't accept everyone, but, in the right time, when it's right, when the universe aligns, we would love to have you on. And if not us, maybe we can get you on Jackson and Clare's podcast or both or others. So anyway, thanks again for joining us. Happy holidays. Be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you all again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.